I would like to call this meeting to order. Kindly have a motion to dispense with the calling of the roll.
Mr. Chair, I move that we dispense with calling of the roll.
Okay, there's a motion to dispense with the calling of the roll. Hearing no objection, the same is hereby dispensed with. Comsec Feli, can we begin with the national anthem, please?
Yes, sir.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupit, di ka pasisilil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong paghaw, may nilang ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagpilipil, ang bituin at araw niya kailan bang may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng maraming pagsika, buhay ay langit sa piling ko. Aming ligaya dapat may mga api, magmamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Oratio Imperata for protection against COVID-19. Merciful and compassionate Father, we come to you in our need to seek your protection against the COVID-19 that has disturbed and claimed many lives. We ask you now to look upon us with love and by your healing hand dispel the fear of sickness and death, restore our hope, and strengthen our faith. We pray that you guide the people tasked to find cures for this disease and to stem its transmission. We thank you for the vaccines developed, made possible by your guiding hands. Bless our efforts to use these vaccines to end the pandemic in our country. We pray for our health workers that they may minister to the sick with competence and compassion. Grant them health in mind and body, strength in their commitment, protection from the disease. We pray for those afflicted. May they be restored to health. Protect those who care for them. Grant eternal rest to those who have died. Give us the grace in these trying times to work for the good of all and to help those in need. May our concern and compassion for each other see us through this crisis and lead us to conversion and holiness. Grant all these through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much. Comsec Feli, kindly acknowledge the resource persons who are joining us this morning in today's briefing.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Your Honors. In today's briefing of the Committee on Human Rights, we have invited the following resource persons, and they are in attendance. We have from the Philippine National Police, Police Colonel Vincent S. Calanoga, Chief H. Rao, Police Major Rex Pasqua, Police Major Bukal, Police Colonel Ariola, Police Lieutenant Colonel Irinco, Police Colonel De La Serna. From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have Colonel Joel Alejandro S. Naknak and Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Esquivias. From the Commission on Human Rights, we have Attorney Erwin Caliba and Mr. Vincent Leo Gamboa. From the Department of Agriculture, we have Director Leo Canada. From the Department of Social Welfare and Development, we have former Congresswoman Yusek Luz Viminda Ilagan. From the National Food Coalition, we have Ms. Aurea Miklat Teves. From NTF, LCAC, the spokesperson for human rights, we have Undersecretary Severo Catura. Also from NTF, LCAC, we have Undersecretary Joel C. Egco. And we have with us Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade Jr. May we request those who have not been called to please manifest their attendance.
Yung mga currently online natin ng mga resource individuals, kindly state your name, yung mga hindi natawag ni Comsec Feli, so that you could be properly recognized. Comsec Feli sa DILG, sino ang present?
No one, sir. Although we have invited them, sir.
Walang pinadalang DILG?
Wala po.
Okay.
I think we were able to recognize everyone na po sa room.
Okay. So, pleasant good morning to all distinguished members in attendance for today's briefing and to our co-workers in government, friends, and the viewing public. Magbigay ayon sa kakayahan, kumuha, batay sa pangangailangan. These words written in a rather decrepit cardboard started it all. The signage placed in between a few bags of vegetables, fruits, and local produce for everyone to read and to heed. In a neighborhood in Maginhawa, Quezon City, which is part of my district. Some months back was the tipping point. In the best-selling book of Malcolm Gladwell, published 2 decades ago, tipping point is the magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses a threshold, tips and spreads like wildfire. The community pantries have indeed spread like wildfire. And Miss Patricia Noon made it possible. Now we read from news different types of community pantries. In Pangasinan, a community pantry with free healthcare service on wheels. In Albay, a coffee community pantry. In Antipolo City, a zero-waste community pantry. In Kawit, Cavite, a Taho community pantry. And in Barangay Sangandaan, Project 8, Quezon City, a community pantry and a community library called Happy Lillery. The 3 rules of epidemics in Gladwell's book, such as the law of the few, the stickness factor, and the power of context have found their model on this noble idea. When a private person was started out a community pantry on her own initiative and with meager resources, a pantry that is open to the public, where everybody, without discrimination, may avail his or her daily meal, or share his or her abundance, and where everybody learns the simple rules of humanity, that of compassion, kindness, and generosity. The tipping point has since flourished in our culture, where the innate values of bayanihan, pakikipaggawa, at pakikisama have grown deeply in our roots as Filipinos, and the community pantry is an attestation of genuine concern and love for our neighbors, of getting just enough for our daily needs, and of having the opportunity to share in return what we have aplenty in our own tables. It is through the community pantry that our right to life is exercised, our right to food is sustained, and our right to live with dignity and empowerment are altogether fulfilled. It is in this context that the committee intends to exercise its legislative oversight function so that Congress would be able to look closely into the emergence of the community pantries. The pantries may be viewed as relief mechanisms for our people who have struggled against hunger and poverty, lack of employment, and death or illness. Particular opposition from government stakeholders, and this fact has created the tension between those who benefit from the mechanism and those who construe such as means merely employed by sympathizers of communist ideology. Today, we will find out from our resource persons, mostly from the government agencies and the civil society, their respective mandates, programs, and policies as regards the community pantries, and how should the economic, social, and cultural rights of people be protected and enhanced with the implementation of such program. With that, the chair now opens the floor for the briefing proper. Once again, I would like to thank everyone in attendance. The emergence of the community pantries has brought certain issues. While it enabled some people to share what they have and some to receive what they need, issues have arose because of different policies and different guidelines being observed. Now gusto natin sanang maayos to dahil I think lahat naman tayo nagkakaisa when we say na sa panahon na dinadanas natin, lalo na sa panahon ng panbabayan, ngunit meron kagaya doon sa naging issue kay Patricia noon who started the community pantry, several statements and coverage has been given regarding yun ngang naging red tagging sa kanila. Nagkaroon rin tayo ng issue sa mga vis-a-vis yung nangyayari nga na nagkakaroon ng kaguluhan sa pilahan dahil sa dami ng taong dumarating. So ngayon, through this committee, what we want to achieve is to learn yung mga kung ano yung respective mandates ng bawat isa sa atin and how we could put everything together so that we could properly oversee, encourage, and sustain kung ano man ang biyaya o karanasan na nadudulot nitong mga community pantries. So with this, maybe I'll ask first yung before we go to our resource person, Congressman Ron Salo to provide also an insight as dito sa situation natin, and then we'll go to the other stakeholders. Kong Ron?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Definitely, we support the initiative of our countrymen, particularly those who really care for the least of our brethren in sharing what they have. But nonetheless, we also want to know exactly whether this particular initiative of our well-meaning brethren or Filipinos is being exploited and being used by certain groups of people in order to cast any aspersion against the efforts of the government. So we really wish to hear and listen from all the stakeholders in order for us to have a balanced view of all these things. We really thank all our resource persons. We know that we will definitely be having an objective discussion in today's hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kong Ron. Kong Kiko?
I think we should proceed with the briefing.
Okay, thank
Mr.
you very
Chair.
much. Comsec
you.
Feli, sinong pwede nating unahin?
Sir, Ms. Ria Teves from National Food Coalition.
Okay. Ms. Teves, please.
Can you hear me now? Fairly?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. First and foremost, of course, I'd like to thank Congressman Bong Suntay and Fairly Parcon, who were actually the facilitators in pushing for the National Food Act, which is actually one of the priority programs, quote unquote, by our Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles under the Executive Order 101. which validates the concept of the community pantry. To 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 introduce the process, I would say the National Food Coalition does not have actually a role or an experience in terms of the community pantries because our objective is in terms of policy actions for Congress to develop the National Food Act, which is actually a bill that is supposed to end hunger by 2030 based on the Sustainable Development Goals. In saying that, the concept of the community pantries is similar to what we would like to do in terms of the National Food Act. If if we will trace back the historical roots of the issues that we are pushing for in Congress is about ending hunger and impoverishment. That's why I believe Congressman Suntay is very passionate about this because the concept of connecting the producers to the consumer is one of the tenet of the National Food Act. And I think that's also one of the reasons why our beloved cabinet secretary has really pushed the president to really enact an executive order to initiate the process of the National Food Act. However, this has been stopped at the Senate. I mean, the Committee on Justice and Human Rights under Senator Gordon did not actually act on this. Hopefully, sana, with the opening of the Senate, they will act on it. But I saw in terms of the priority bills that they are pushing that they are not doing this. That's why in behalf of the people who are suffering from hunger and impoverishment, I strongly suggest and beg the people from the military, from Congress, all those who are present here to please request Senator Gordon and the other senators are amenable already to push for the passage of the National Food Act to please facilitate that Senator Gordon can act on this and become a priority program of the government of Duterte because this can be a legacy that within the last term of office of the present administration we can at least alleviate hunger in terms of prioritizing it in the program of the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sige, we will make sure that we will follow it up with the office of Senator Gordon. Actually, I'll uh, I'll schedule a possible meeting with Senator Gordon para mapag-usapan namin yung status ng bill which we are pushing here at in the House of Representatives.
Thank you so much, Congressman Suntay, because if we can do this, I believe we will have a historical trend, not only in the Philippines, but around the world on how to handle the hunger and impoverishment caused by the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Congressman Femia, Kong Ami Sangkopan, and Congressman Onyx Quezesologo, who are also with us online. Now, before we proceed, bigyan ko lang ng konting background itong community pantry and how it started. So this all started, well, actually, it all started back in April 14 when Patricia Non, a businesswoman who had to close her furniture upholstery business because of the pandemic, opened the first community pantry by placing a bamboo cart full of essential supplies such as alcohol, rice, vegetables, and canned goods on the street of her neighborhood along Maguinhawa Street. Now, Maguinhawa Street, as I mentioned earlier, is kalsada yan sa district ko, which is also near UP. Maguinhawa has slowly developed into a parang food hub doon sa distrito ko. While it's close to UP, meron din mga urban community, poor communities which abuts this particular street. Now, Patricia, non put up a sign that encourage people to do as follows. Magbigay ayon sa kakayahan, kumuha batay sa pangangailangan. Now, it was our way to show to ourselves that we can help one another, and we will be able to organize ourselves, and that we can organize ourselves. Now, dahil nagkaroon ito ng she posted it in social media, and it called attention to some individuals, generous individuals. It inspired farmers from as far as Nueva Ecija and Paniki, Tarlac, to donate part of the harvest to the pantry. The farmers from Nueva Ecija asked the Roman Catholic parish priest to deliver the contribution composed of fresh vegetables, while a group of farmers from Paniki, Tarlac sent sweet potatoes. Now, in a matter of days, yung post sa social media became viral, and other community pantries sprouted out. Pero I believe, well, ano ito I don't know kung it generated a lot of media attention when this community pantry kasi was closed because it was red tagged by the community, by the Quezon City Police District when it posted sa kanilang official web page that the pantry was being used as propaganda by the Communist Party of the Philippines. Now, Feli, meron ba tayong inimbita mula sa QCPD to shed light on this?
Police Colonel Vincent Calanoga. And
Okay.
they have a presentation daw po. They will
Sige.
brief us.
Okay, PNP, can you provide us with the briefing? Yung presentation niya, please. Feli, si Colonel Calanonga ba yung mag-provide ng presentation?
Yes, sir.
Colonel, can we proceed? So while waiting for Colonel Calalonga to end his presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Congressman Lawrence Fortun, who is also with us into this morning's meeting. Colonel, ka mo ba sila? Parang may problema ba yung nila?
Naka-login naman po sila, sir.
Oo. Oh. PNP, yung na-flash for a while yung inyong briefing material pero nawala ulit at walang nagsasalita.
Sir, naayos lang daw po yung audio.
Ay, naayos yung audio. Okay. Kongami, good morning.
Audio check.
Yan, may audio ka na, Colonel.
Naririnig na po ako, sir.
Okay. Naririnig na. Sige.
Yung sir, mag-share screen na po kami, sir. To the Chairman of the Committee on Human Rights, the Honorable Representative Jesus Bong Suntay, sir, and to the other honorable members of the committee, participants for today's meeting, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. The PNP's briefing on emergence of community pantries as relief mechanism for the protection of the economic, social, and cultural rights of the people during the COVID-19 pandemic today, May 19, 2021, is as follows. What started as a makeshift community pantry initiated by Miss Ana Patricia known at 96 Maginhawa Street, Quezon City on April 14, 2021 has subsequently become a contagious reflection of the Bayanihan spirit in various parts of the country. Dubbed as the Maginhawa Community Pantry, its purpose is to build a community that will give and take by their own volition without the intervention of third parties. Ms. Non first stocked the pantry with vegetables along with basic necessities from the groceries such as alcohol, face masks, canned goods, and rice. And it later went viral online and garnered a lot of media coverage, and many people, others, have set up their own version in their areas in response to the call for solidarity. These community pantries allow people to get free donated food items ranging from vegetables, fruits, eggs, bread, instant noodles, coffee, dried food items, as well as other essentials like clothes, slippers, shoes, face masks, and face shields, and alcohol. They work on the concept of taking only what one needs or kumuha ng bagay batay sa pangangailangan and giving what one can or magbigay batay sa kakayahan. As of April 21, 2021, 46 structures of the same concept have sprouted in Metro Manila and in the provinces. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque Jr. said the emergence of community pantries exemplifies the Filipino Bayanihan spirit during trying times. Caloocan Bishop Pablo Virgilio David described the community pantries as the clearest and most tangible signs of hope in the midst of hopelessness brought about by this pandemic. However, despite its early success, the initiative has garnered cynics and critics saying human nature and greed has garnered eventually and overturned its earnest intentions. Administration critics have also emphasized the government's alleged failure to respond to the people's needs amidst the pandemic. In response, the Philippine National Police stated that it will not interfere with any voluntary private sector initiative that seek to alleviate the living conditions of the less fortunate severely affected by the pandemic by providing for their basic needs according to then PNP Chief of Police General Debolt Encinas. The PNP fully supports such expression of Bayanihan culture and Filipino spirit of compassion. In fact, the PNP initiated in 2020 a food bank project for indigent and disaster-stricken communities. He cited reports of the continuing implementation of the PNP food bank project that has benefited some 35,512 families and 8,511 other individuals. As we appreciate the benefits of the operation of the community pantries, we shall also have to meet specific standards to avoid any incident that may cause harm not only to the person seeking to access aid, but also to those organizing and maintaining them. In this regard, the following guidelines were issued by the PNP. Privately operated community pantries shall not be required to secure LGU permits, but shall properly coordinated in terms of area of operations and venue of the pantries, taking into consideration, among others, compliance to the road clearing directives of the government. No illegal or harmful items shall be allowed in the community pantry, such as alcohol beverages and cigarettes, among others. LGUs shall allow the unhampered operations of community pantries and shall enforce the health protocols as provided by ordinances and the interagency task force resolutions. The LGU shall provide assistance which may be in the form of provision of venue where the pantry can be established and operated, providing links between local producers and the pantry in case donors would like to source their goods from the former, provision of security to maintain peace and order in venues where the pantries are located, and helping in allowing the pantry to reach those beneficiaries physically incapable of proceeding to the venue. LGUs shall not require from the community pantry operators any exaction of fee by virtue of its operation or for the assistance the LGU is providing to it. LGU officials, personnel, or those connected to the same shall not put up signage, billboards, posters, names, initials, and or images of any government officials in community pantry operations, as well as the goods donated or contained therein. LGUs shall not discourage the operation of community pantries, but rather support and promote the same therein. LGU shall ensure that in all interaction with community pantry operators, donors, and those receiving or intending to receive aid from the same shall be provided adequate government services and protection, and all their rights shall be respected and protected. To further its involvement, the Philippine National Police, under the leadership of Police General Guillermo Eliasar, launched the nationwide Barangayanihan Help and Food Bank in all police regional offices in the entire country. The said activity aims to strengthen the spirit of bayanihan among Filipinos, which manifests a strong collaborative partnership between the PNP and private organizations to support the Filipino people in their needs in this time of pandemic. Barangayanihan Help and Food Bank is our strategy to cooperate with the organizers, volunteers, patrons, because no this project. The source mechanism of the PNP as supply line to the various barangayanihan outreach efforts in grassroots community in the barangays. A proactive response to the current pandemic that brings with it economic health and other problems aims to ease the burden of families in various barangays through providing them with the appropriate government services and community support for various needs. The Kapwa Ko Sagot Ko Adopt a Family had 27,107 adopted families by the members of the PNP with a total amount assistance of 17,828,919 pesos. The barangayanihan covering the period of April 30, 2021 to May 14, 2021 have already established 12,622 kiosks with 23,349 barangayanihan activities. The project has 1,008,259 beneficiaries with estimated amount of 71,708,179 pesos. The concept of community pantries exemplify the time-tested Filipino tradition of bayanihan. The swift replication of the idea to various parts of the country indicates these inherent Filipino attributes of being ready to help others. However, based on the collected information, although the community pantry has the best intent and purpose, the health protocol necessary to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus should always be a part of the consideration. To further encourage every element in our ranks, the Chief PNP appealed in his statement. Inaasahan ko na ang lahat ng kapulisan ay makikiisa at isa puso ang proyektong barangayanihan dahil ito ang tunay na kahulugan ng PNP motto na to serve and protect. At ito ang tunay na diwa ng salitang Pilipino. Ito po ang salita ng aming hepe ng Pambansang Pulisya, si Police General Guillermo Lorenzo T. Eliazar. Ito po ang stand po ng PNP National Headquarters. Yung iba pong insidente na kung saan tinawag po na profiling o red tagging ay hindi po sakop ng pulisya ng pambansang ng buong PNP. At ito po ay binigyan ako ng kaukulang aksyon para hindi na po ito mauulit. Sa mga naapektuhan po, humihingi po ang PNP raw ng paumanhin sa mga taong naapektuhan kung ano man po yung balita o naipost na hindi po nila nagustuhan. Yung mga pagtatanong po ng aming mga pulis, halimbawa yung mga pulis po na nagpapatrolyo sa kalsada, sila po ang may katungkulan na alamin ang lahat na nangyayaring insidente o anumang aktibidad sa kanilang area of responsibility o sa kanilang beat. Kaya po, pag ang ating mga pulis po ay nagtatanong, yan po ay para maisama po sa kanilang after patrol report. Sana po maintindihan po natin ang ating mga kapulisan. Maraming salamat po, Honorable Chairman Bong Suntay, sir.
Maraming salamat. Thank you very much, General Calanoga. So, ito ay, well, this is a good revelation na as you mentioned, the PNP is in full support with the spirit of bayanihan espoused and exemplified by the community pantries. But sadly, yun nga, dahil dun sa mga siguro misunderstanding at naging initial statements or actions when this all started, ito yung medyo nagdulot ng konting hindi pagkakaintindihan between yung PNP and some organizers of the community pantries. Naiintindihan rin namin na of course kasama sa mandate ng PNP na alamin din yung sitwasyon na nangyayari sa lugar at kung sino yung nag-o-organize. Siguro lang ang naging dahilan nitong hindi pagkakaintindihan, kagaya ng sinasabi nga, nabahala yung mga ibang organizer kung parang ang dating kasi sa kanila napo-profile sa kanila, so natatakot ngayon sila kung bakit tinatanong kung saan sila nakatira, 'di ba? Kung ano yung kung parang iniisip nila binabantayan rin yung pagkilos nila, and this is something that the PNP really has to clarify, na while it's part of their mandate, we have to make them understand also, the organizers, we have to also make them understand that it is done not because they are being profiled, pero para lang yung malaman lang kung sino yung organizer, and not for anything else. Siguro yun yung kailangan malinaw na na yung ilinaw sa mga taong nag-o-organize, para hindi sila natatakot. Kasi minsan nabibigla sila, kinakatok sila sa bahay ng ating mga uniformed personnel. Siguro sa pagkuha natin ng impormasyon ukol dito, baka mas mabuti yung PNP medyo siguro may kasamang magsama ng representante galing sa barangay na nakakakilala dun sa tao, para hindi sila nababagabag, di ba?
Opo sir, maliwanag naman po sir ang utos po ng ating Chief PNP na ang presensya po ng pulis ay nandun po para tumulong, magprotekta at magserbisyo po sa ating mamamayan, at kasama po din yan yung utos niya, dapat coordinated po palagi sa barangay, at maaari po kasama yung barangay o mga local officials sa mga ganong pong trabaho.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I'd like to acknowledge the presence first of Congressman Lawrence Fortun and Congresswoman Rosas. Congresswoman Rosas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, kami po ay sumusuporta kay Ana Patricia noon. Gusto naming sabihin na yung kanyang ginawa for the community pantry ay talaga namang mahusay, dahil for a certain period of time ay nabigyan ng alwan yung ating mga kababayan na nangangailangan ng tulong, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, actually, bahagi din, meron po kaming pinasa na House Resolution 1763, but I think hindi pa po ito naikakalendaryo dahil May 13 po na-receive, noong May 13 ito na-file yung resolution. Now, Mr. Chair, gusto naming sabihin na yung ginawa ni Ana Patricia noon, dahil ang gobyerno ay nagkaroon ng palpak, palpak, sabihin na natin yung totoo, palpak yung pandemic and crisis response. Dahil sa matagal na economic recession, longest lockdown, yan po yung mga problema. Tapos meron tayong country's inflation ng 4.7% noong February 2021. And my highest inflation rate mula 2019. Tapos napakadami po ng walang trabaho sa kasalukuyan o naghahanap ng trabaho sa kasalukuyan. Kaya hindi po natin masisisi ang mga taong bayan na maghanap ng solusyon kahit papano. At ito nga pong community pantry ay magandang paraan para hindi magutom yung kalakhan ng ating mga mamamayan. Now, Mr. Chair, yung mga ganito po na tugon, kasi actually I will ask DSWD nga kung totoo ba tawag dito na nakapagbigay sila ng mga enough or sapat na ayuda para sa ating mamamayan, kasi obviously hanggang ngayon marami pa rin ng community pantries at marami pa rin ang nandyan. Tapos alam niyo naman, Mr. Chair, sinusulong natin sa Bayanihan 3 na magkaroon ng ayuda para sa ating mga mamamayan. One of the provisions doon sa Bayanihan 3 na sinusulong natin sa kahit paano makabili sila, magkaroon ng purchasing power sa ngayon, dahil hindi naman po pagkain din lang ang problema, pati yung pambayad sa tubig, sa kuryente, sa lahat ng mga pangangailangan ng ating mamamayan. Now, Mr. Chair, allow me to manifest siguro briefly kung ano yung position namin dito, dahil motopropyo naman po kayo nag-hearing ngayon dito sa Committee on Human Rights. Mr. Chair, yung hindi po epektibong pagtugon ng gobyerno sa COVID-19, isa yung bansang Pilipinas sa mga bansa sa buong mundo na nakararanas ng pinakamahabang COVID-19 lockdown. Nagdulot ito ng malawakang kawalan ng trabaho, matinding kagutuman, krisis, wala ring malinaw na program at hindi sapat yung ayudang ibinibigay ng gobyerno. Now, days after the lifting ng 2-week enhanced community quarantine in Greater Manila, si Ana Patricia noon po ay nagkaroon ng bamboo cart with vegetables, canned goods, rice, and alcohol. This was known as Maginhawa Community Pantry. Nakita natin ang pagbabayanihan ng Pilipino, ang mga walang wala pa sa buhay, ang laging handang magbigay ng tulong sa kapwa nangangailangan. Hindi naman po yung mga malalaking korporasyon ang nagbukas eh. Yung mga nagbukas po at tumulong ay mga kapwa mahihirap din. Nasaksihan natin ang pag-aabot ng tulong ng mga magsasaka, mangingisda, mga maninigda. Kumukuha lamang sila ng batay sa pangangailangan nila at nagbibigay ayon sa kanilang kakayahan. Now, more than 1,000 community pantries have sprung up in different parts of the country. This serves as a response to the Filipino people against hunger, poverty, and lack of financial aid. Sa kabila po ng kagandahang loob, unfortunately, kahit po nagpresenta na ang PNP kanina, nakita ko po yung kanilang presentation na hindi daw sila nag-red tagging at hindi nag-profiling. Ang totoo po, kasama po dun sa aming resolusyon na yung PNP and yung NTF-ELCAC claimed that community pantry organizers are affiliated with the communist movement. And the QCPD and NTF-ELCAC even shared posts on Facebook red tagging community pantry, giving death threats and rape threats because of this. Yung act of compassion niya at selflessness niya, naging mas lalong delikado yung nangyari para sa kanya. Kaya hindi po kami nagtataka, hindi nakapagtataka na maging dito sa committee briefing, kung pagsasalitain na naman ng red tagging, wala namang ebidensya, etc., hindi naman nilalagay sa korte, hindi naman binibigyan ng proper perspective, yun po. Talagang mahilig i-red tag ang mga Pilipino na gusto lamang tumulong sa kapwa at wala nang maasahan sa gobyerno, Mr. Chair. Yung community pantry organizers fear for their safety. Totoo po yun. Pero despite these threats, they still choose to continue to help. Hindi sila nagpapatinag, nagpapatuloy sila para pagsilbihan ng masang gutom at nangihirapan sa kasalukuyan. Now, Mr. Chair, sana po ay, in fact, ito pong resolution talaga ay naka-address sa Committee on Human Rights, I think, kasi yung resolution is commending Ana Patricia Noon and other community pantry organizers for rekindling the spirit of bayanihan and solidarity in helping poor Filipinos amid the COVID-19 pandemic and worsening economic crisis, Mr. Chair. So, ito po yung sana po ay mai-kalendaryo natin at malaman natin kung ano po yung mabigyan natin ng talagang utmost commendation and recognition yung mga nagbigay ng effort para i-ease yung hunger at suffering ng ating mga mamamayan sa kasalukuyan, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Congresswoman Arlene. Well, kaya nga natin pinatawag itong hearing na ito para rin magkaroon ng kalinawan at kasagutan yung mga nai-raise mo. And siguro mamaya magpe-present naman yung DSWD at mabibigyan din nila ng kasagutan yung ni-raise mong concern. So, but before that, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Senior Deputy Majority Leader, Congressman Boying Remulla, na kasama natin ngayon, and Congresswoman Franz Castro. Now, I believe DSWD, CHR, meron din presentation, CHR.
Mr. Chair, wala po kaming presentation, but we would like also to share our thoughts on the matter.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, minonitor po namin noong 2020 yung effect of the pandemic and the response of the government. Nabanggit kanina ni Congresswoman Rosas itong mga statistics po And there really has much effect on various rights to education, but of course, rights to health, right to economic, social, and cultural rights, among others. Nakikita natin may response din po hindi ko na po sa wide talagang yung impact talaga is really hindi natin na-anticipate gaano kalawak. Akala natin sa dali lamang po yon ang yung quarantine periods po natin. But of course, one specific instance din po is really the need to address the need for food in the city, in the NCR particularly. May mga nakalap kaming report na dahil sa mga checkpoints in the countrysides, hindi po pumapasok yung mga gulay, mga pagkain na kailangan dito sa Metro Manila until Department of Agrarian, Department of Agriculture head made some. But despite the assistance given by the government, despite the actions, meron pa rin week ng 2020, pero ngayong sabi nating third wave po siguro na ito, mas tumindi po dahil walang masyadong assistance na, di ba? Unless may i-share sa atin ng DSWD kanina. So allow me, Mr. Chair, in connection with the community pantry, allow me to read the statement that we have already released in connection with the community pantry.
Yes,
and of
please.
course, the community pantry of essential goods, which first emerged in Maginhawa Street, Quezon City, with the purpose of aiding the community and fostering a shared mutual concern for one another. Initiative, as well as other community pantries that have followed, are under the threat of profiling and surveillance by local law enforcement authorities and are subject to red tagging across various accounts in social media. Barely a week since the start of the Maginhawa Community Pantry, organizer Ana Patricia Noon had to suspend the operation of the pantry in consideration of the safety of their volunteers and herself amidst the red tagging of the community initiatives in some government social media pages. Notably, these government social media pages have shared graphics on their accounts linking the community pantry initiatives to the communist movement. The Commission on Human Rights also received reports of local law enforcement agents subjecting organizers of community pantries to questions regarding their affiliations and now viral photos on social media, allegedly showing policemen handing out forms that organizers need to fill out with their personal details. In this context, we remind the government, particularly local law enforcement officers, that collecting data, including the affiliation of community pantry organizers, is an encroachment upon the right to privacy of citizens and represents yet again an overreach and abuse of police power bereft of any statutory or legal basis. We echo the statement of the National Privacy Commission Chairperson Raymond Liboro in calling for the prudent and lawful collection of data by the Philippine Belmonte, assuring support for the community pantry and the safety of the organizers. In times of uncertainty, Filipinos have come together to help one another to overcome adversity. The community pantry is an example of the exemplary spirit of bayanihan to make up for the gaps of government action in addressing the long-term adverse effects of the pandemic. The shameful that have come to see the community pantries as means of sustenance to provide food for themselves and their families. In the midst of despair, let not the actions of the few prevail. We must continue efforts to build trust between one another. In the end, let trust and peace among our communities prevail as we weather this pandemic. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, HR, Mr. Kaliba. But to address yung concern mo, in fact, doon sa statement ni General Calanoga kanina, sinabi nga nila, while there were yung initial missteps, they are trying to correct or have corrected itong initial missteps nila with regards nga doon sa construed red tagging ng mga community organizer. Kaya nga, yun din yung gusto nating to be able to resolve in today's hearing kung paano yung magiging approach, because we also have to balance yun nga yung karapatan ng ating mga mamamayan, pati na rin yung yung trabaho naman at responsibilidad ng ating PNP para mapanatili yung kaayusan sa lugar, and we all have to do this together.
Yeah.
So
Mr.
siguro,
Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we thank for the update from the PNP. That statement was made way back in April, I think April 20. So there are already developments that happened, and thank you for PNP for clarifying that.
thank you very much. Now, DSWD, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Congressman Lawrence Fortun, who is also with us in today's hearing. DSWD,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good morning.
please.
My name is Luz
Congresswoman
Ilagan. Yes,
Yeah.
and thank you for inviting us to this hearing. We appreciate it very much. And let me inform the body that, of course, everybody is aware that the DSWD is the prime agency that addresses social protection and assistance to our people. And so we welcome any assistance coming from the private sector, coming from other government agencies or other sectors that are all well-intentioned, because we do have to help our people. Mr. Chair, with or without the community pantries, the DSWD continues to carry out its mandate, because we do want to end the hunger, the poverty that our people are experiencing, especially now that we have this pandemic. And we are aware that we have existing programs. Whenever there are disasters caused by human beings or by natural causes, we always have our food packs and non-food packs. Some people may say they are not enough. Yes, but what is enough really for people who are in need? But we do address these needs. We have the supplemental feeding. They're ongoing. And the bangon, even assistance to our people. So we continue with all these programs and services, and we coordinate with LGUs in providing assistance to our people. The DSWD is only one among many other agencies that are tasked to assist our people. So, Mr. Chair, our point of view is this: we welcome assistance coming from different sectors, and we do our best to address our needs and to respond to all kinds of disasters that are experienced by our people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Congresswoman Ilagan. I think meron concern kanina na ni-raise si Congresswoman Arlene about yung actual na tulong na ibababa ng DSWD. Congresswoman Arlene, nandyan ka pa ba? Congresswoman Arlene? Yung sa DSWD, I think yung concern niya is yung actual na pagbaba, both nung initial dun sa Bayanihan 1 ho, kasi meron tayong inapruban na ayuda para sa mga mamamayan. It was supposed to be, I believe, in 2 tranches. May mga ibang nagsabi first tranche lang ho yung nakuha nila at hindi na umabot yung second tranche. Now, ito nire-relate nga ni Kong Arlene doon naman sa community pantry natin, na ayon sa kanya, kaya rin na nagsulputan raw is a reflection ng shortcoming ng ating national government. Ako naman ang paniniwala ko dito sa pandemya na ating nararanasan ngayon, kailangan talaga magtulong-tulong lahat. Hindi kakayanin ng gobyerno mag-isa na resolbahin itong problema na ating kasalukuyang dinaranas, at kailangan ang mamamayan, both the private sector and the government sector should put their hands together in trying to help resolve the current situation. Pero meron ho ba kayong data na maipipresent yung bilang ho ng mga taong tinulungan na, yung ongoing na mga tulong na ibinababa ng DSWD?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. And I have with me, and they are present in this committee hearing, so, the directors who can provide the data that you need. So may I have permission, sir, to put
Yes, please.
on we have Miss Miracle. Miss Maymay Gutierrez to help, and she can provide the data necessary for the information that you need, sir.
Thank you. Kong Arlene, ayan, sasagutin ng DSWD yung ibang katanungan that you raised earlier.
Actually,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Thank
Kong
you, Mr.
Arlene.
Chair. Pasensya na, Mr. Chair. Nag-lag yata itong ano ko. Gumaganon-ganon yung signal. So, Mr. Chair, okay po yan. Well appreciated po sa amin na malaman kung ano yung mga... Kasi I am sure ang report ay on non-food and food items na nabigay nila. We would like to know that. Tapos particularly po sa mga cities, Mr. Chair. Kasi di ba, paano yung mga bukod sa mga food items, packages, ano po yung mga naibigay na? And how many? Kasi yun naman yung crucial sa atin, ano, Mr. Chair? How many per population ng ating mga cities ang nabigyan na? At magkano yung inabot na batay sa auditing or batay sa siguro sa kung ano yung data ng DSWD? And how often, Mr. Chair, how often nila na ibibigay yung tulong sa ating mga kababayan? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kong Arlene. So, Ms. Miramel, while we appreciate yung submission ng hard copy nung tungkol dun sa total na naibigay nyo, bigyan nyo na rin kami ng oral briefing with regards to this, please. And then later on, kindly submit the same.
Mr. Chair, my apologies po because we do not have the data right. I do not have the data right now kasi po I was informed that what I will be presenting is our data on the supplementary feeding program po. So my apologies, Mr. Chair.
O di bali na, kindly submit that data to the committee, please. Pero
yes, within
at
the
the
day,
same
Mr.
time,
Chair, opo.
Okay, salamat. Ben, yung sa supplemental feeding naman, kindly report on it.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually po, for this year, alam po natin na medyo na-delay din po tayo sa ating implementation of the feeding program. But yun nga po, nasa 90% naman na po ang ating natapos doon sa naging delay natin in last year's implementation. So we are very hopeful na for this June 2021 ay matatapos na po yung tinatawag nating 10th cycle which covers the school year 2020-2021. And for this year, Mr. Chair, which is the 11th cycle of the feeding program, ay ang nakalaan po nating pondo dito para sa ating mga kabataan ay nasa 3,211,846 para po doon sa tinatawag nating hot meal. Yun po yung may rice at saka may viand or ulam, ano po. At nasa 111,227 naman po, Mr. Chair, ang ating nakalaan para naman po sa tinatawag nating milk feeding program po natin. Kasi nga, this time, may kasama na pong milk component yung ating feeding program. Hindi lang po siya puro hot meal. And given na rin po yung pandemic, Mr. Chair, ang naging strategy po ni DSWD ay hindi lang po yung hot meal ang ating siniserve, kundi po meron din po tayong tinatawag na dry ration. So may mga dinidistribute po tayo sa ating mga children beneficiaries na mga dried mango seeds o yung pong sa ginagamit natin sa ingredients natin sa mga sopas, yun po, inuuwi po nila sa bahay para maiuwi. And at the same time, we believe na nagiging karagdagan din po na pagkain ito sa ating mga family na kasama po ng ating children beneficiaries. And yun nga po, Mr. Chair, we are looking forward na for this 11th cycle implementation that will commence in July 2021, somehow we can respond to the hunger na nai-experience din po ng ating mga kabataang Pilipino because of the pandemic and because of the unemployment of their probably their parents or members of the family na nagbibigay po ng support para sa kanilang daily sustenance. So for 2022 naman, Mr. Chair, yun, alam naman po natin na yun na nga po ang we are looking forward to the implementation of the Mandanas ruling. So for 2022 ay medyo ang focus of concentration na po ng DSWD ay yung mga areas in the 5th and 6th class municipalities na bibigyan po namin ng fund augmentation at the same time technical assistance, as well as doon sa tinatawag po nating 32 priority provinces under the HDPR cluster, as well as the Philippine Plan of Action on Nutrition na mga target areas po natin. So yun yung magiging focus of concentration ng ating assistance in terms of technical and financial assistance, Mr. Chair. So that is all po, Mr. Chair, at maraming salamat po.
Okay, thank you very much, maraming salamat, Ms. Laksa.
Mr.
Now,
Chair.
Kong Franz Castro. Then I'll go back to Kong Arlene. Yes, Kong Franz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, no? Doon sa report ng DSWD about doon sa feeding program. So mahalaga yung yung pagpapakain natin sa mga bata. Pero pwede po bang malaman, Mr. Chair, magkano bang amount itong sinasabi ng ating DSWD doon sa mga cycle 1 to 11 na ginastos nila para doon sa pandemya? At gusto rin po nating malaman, Mr. Chair, kung ano yung naging progress at ano yung meron po ba itong study kung ano naging effect nito doon sa pag-mitigate ng hunger among doon sa, lalong-lalo na sa mga pamilya ng mga mahihirap, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Laksa, DSWD, may katanungan si Kong Franz.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Congresswoman Franz. Actually, Madam, based din po sa report na ating nakukuha sa ating mga regional offices na nanggaling din po sa ating mga LGU implementers, kung ang pagbabasihan po natin ay in terms of the nutritional status ng ating mga beneficiaries ng feeding program from last year until this year po up to May 2021, kabataan kasi, Mr. Chair, kung kahit hindi nyo po na itatanong, ang naging strategy din po kasi natin dahil nga alam natin na existing ang hunger because of the unemployment ay naging twice a day feeding po ang naging strategy ng DSWD sa ating supplementary feeding program. Although, hindi man po ganoon kalaki, nasa 1.8 million na bata po ang naging beneficiary ng ating feeding program from last year until this year, ay yun nga po, Mr. Chair, kasi nga ang limitation nga 1.8 million, Mr. Chair and Madam Congresswoman.
Okay, Mr. Chair, kung merong data po doon sa mga lugar, ilang mga bata yung nabigyan, pwede pong magbigay at kung magkano yung budget na inilaan. Kasi mahalaga din ito, Mr. Chair, kung pwede tayong siguro madagdagan yung budget nitong feeding program, lalong-lalo na, Mr. Chair, na nakikita naman natin na tatagal pa itong pandemya na ito, no, hanggat mabagal ang pagbabakuna, konti ang ayuda, hindi sapat yung mga ayuda na naibibigay. Baka dito sa feeding program, lalo na yung mga bata natin, kasi concerned po ako doon sa ating mga bata. Pangalawa, Mr. Chair, na-appreciate ko po yung pagbibigay ng significance ng komite na ito at syempre ng CHR, ng DSWD, doon sa mga community pantry. Kagaya na nasabi ng ating colleagues na si Congressman Brosas, bunga ito ng ng kapalpakan ng ating gobyerno doon sa pagbibigay ng sapat na ayuda. Kaya nga tayo magpo-propose tayo ng Bayanihan 3 para magbigay ng dagdag na ayuda sa lahat ng pamilyang Filipino. Kaya ito pong ano na to, no, likas po sa ating mga Filipino itong pagtutulungan, pagbabayanihan at pagbibigay ng malasakit doon ng apology. I appreciate that. Nagbigay sila ng ano doon sa ilang mga ano ba yan, misunderstanding, sa mga harassment, etc. So, Mr. Chair, sa PNP, na-check nyo na po ba yung mga post ng mga PNP na mga official na mga Facebook account tungkol po doon sa pagre-red tagging po doon sa mga community pantry?
And PNP, kindly, who would like to answer the question of Kong Franz sa PNP?
Yes, yes sir.
Yes, General Calanoga. Okay.
Nagre-react po doon. Hindi po lahat ng sabihin nating nag-comment doon na parang red tagging hindi po lahat nanggaling po sa pulis.
So ang ibig mo
sabihin po galing din po sa mga civilian.
So have you checked all, Mr. Chair? Kasi kung kapag titignan natin ngayon, na-check niyo na po ba yung lahat ng mga... So sigurado po ba kayo on record na masasabi niyo na na-check niyo na lahat yung mga official mga accounts ng about red tagging po ng ating mga community pantry? Hindi po ako nagtutukoy dun sa mga civilian na sinasabi ninyo. So, PNP po ang tinatanong ko, Mr. Chair, kung sila ba ay naging prudent or naging mapagmatsyag sa lahat ng ng Facebook, maging individual na mga pulis dun sa pag-red tag po ng ating mga individual na nasasangkot po doon sa community pantry.
At tuloy-tuloy naman po ma'am yung ating pag-examine po ng mga Facebook accounts. At iniisa-isa po natin na tinitingnan lahat yung mga comments, pati po yung mga account po na nag-comment po doon sa ating Facebook account. Kung pwede naman po kami makipagtulungan sa inyo, ma'am, kung meron po kayong particular na mga comments doon o personalities na pwede po natin tignan with your cooperation, gagawin po natin para ma-address po natin kung ano man po yung issue.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you po. Yung pong yung recently na kino-complain po ni Miss Patricia noon doon sa mga harassment, death threat, meron pang mga sexual na meron nakarating na po ba ito doon sa inyong office at meron po ba tayong nagawa? Kung meron, update.
Namin ang formal po na complaint para magbigyan po natin ng action. Although meron na pong ginagawa ang ating mga sangay ng kapulisan, pero iba pa rin po pag personal po na makikipag-cooperate sa atin si Miss at matukoy po natin kung sino po talaga yung may liability.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. Naitanong ko lang ito kasi makaka-discourage ito doon sa mga mamamayan natin na gusto rin namang tumulong at magbigay ng kanilang kaunting maibibigay doon sa mga mas mahirap nating mga mamamayan. In fact, Mr. Chair, dahil din po sa inspirasyon na ginawa po ni Miss Patricia noon, ang amin pong tulong guro na pinamumunuan po ng mga unions ng mga teachers natin nationwide, lalong-lalo na dito sa Quezon City, Mr. Chair, nagbukas din po kami ng yung mga union ng mga teachers na constituents ko po, nagbukas din sila ng tulong guro na sa 6 na district sa Quezon City na nagbibigay po sila halos ngayon mag-iisang buwan na rin. Kaya siyempre natatakot din kami. Alam niyo, Mr. Chair, alam niyo naman ang act. Isa sa mga de facto na tinuturing na communist front at saka terorista. Kaya natatakot din yung mga volunteer teacher namin na tumulong sa ating mga mamamayan kung may mga ganito. So last question na lang po, Mr. Chair, masisiguro po ba ng PNP na protected po yung ating mga organizers ng mga pantry at hindi sila maharas o matithreaten?
May I answer, Mr. Chair, sir?
And I think, Kong France, one thing has been made very clear here on the part of the PNP. Sabi nga, while there were certain missteps doon sa initial na approach sa community pantry, they have exerted some moves and actions to correct it. Now, kagaya ng nabanggit mo rin, ukol doon sa mga posting sa Facebook page, ang sinasabi ni General Calanoga, minsan doon sa page yata nila may mga nagko-comment na hindi galing sa kapulisan. Pero ang concern ni Kong France, General, is that we have to ensure na on the part of our PNP, hindi nagmumula sa, hindi nagiging official statement mula sa PNP. Yun ang sinasabi ni Kong France na nako-construe as having red tag certain individuals.
So, Mr. Chair, lastly, may I hear the comment of our General Vincent dun sa tanong ko po na matitiyak niyo po ba yung kaligtasan, safety ng ating mga community organizers po? Community pantry organizers.
Apo, ma'am. Kagaya po ng utos po ng ating Chief PNP, si General Elizar po, sabi niya walang palalampasin na reklamo. At basta po coordinated po at nasa kaalaman po ng ating pulisya yung mga pag-set up po ng community pantry. Nandyan po ang ating mga pulis para tumulong po, mag-assist at siguraduhin ligtas po ang organizer kasama po yung mga humihingi po ng aid. At muli po, kung meron din pong mga reklamo pa rin sa ating mga kapulisan, lalo-lalo na po kay Ms. Non, pwede pong magpag-ugnayan po dito mismo po sa aking opisina sa Philippine National Police Human Rights Affairs Office. Ako po mismo ang aalalay sa kanya para matugunan po kung ano po ang kanyang reklamo.
And,
salamat, Mr. Chair.
Kong France, and I believe si General Eliazar, ating si PNP, naiintindihan yung sitwasyon dito sa Quezon City because he was a former district director ng QCPD dito sa Quezon City .
Yes, Mr. Chair, inabot ko pa yan si PNP Chief Eliazar. Inabot ko pa yan nung ako po ay teacher sa Quezon City.
Ano
Kaya
naman
kilala
yan
ko po si General Eliazar.
Then you would know na very receptive naman si General Eliazar sa mga ganyang bagay. And I'm sure he will not tolerate certain misdoings. I believe si Miss Ria Teves wants to say something. Naka-mute ho kayo. Miss Teves, naka-mute kayo.
Okay, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. First and foremost, we know very well that bigger than the post-war period, and even the hunger situation was much, much bigger than the post-war period. Imagine that during the Second World War. Ngayon, the community pantry actually provided us the bayanihan spirit that trended internationally. In fact, I saw international posts that actually glorified the community spirit here in the Philippines, what our common people did for our country. In saying that, I believe Patricia Non should be commended. In fact, she should be given a recognition by the government in terms of what he did and spearheaded what nobody has done before and lifted the spirit of the Filipino people. I think that's the first one that I have to say. And I believe and I recognize that the apology of the military with respect to the community pantry is actually a very good sign in terms of the community spirit that we are having. Secondly, I think in going back to the issue of hunger and poverty cannot be handled solely by the people. The community spirit, the bayanihan, is actually highly recognized. However, the government should actually take charge. I am going back to the National Food Act because, Chair, if you remember, when we were developing in the committee, the National Food Act, it is the establishment of a system of governance in food. Napakahalaga po ito. Kasi if we will establish a system of governance in food, yung kabuuang value chain will be handled systematically by the government, whereby it will be a whole of nations approach. It will not only by the government, but it will also be with the producers and with the retailers. So ito pong sistema ng pagsasapalisiya ng food program natin na ay napakahalaga at hindi ito pwedeng ayusin ng isang line agency o ilang line agency. It should be handled by the Office of the President. Actually, even if, for example, a Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles started this already, meron pong limitations in terms of the level that he has been doing, and I believe he has done his best. He has done his best to handle the task force on the eradication of hunger in the Philippines. In saying that, the system will actually develop a national food policy and a national food program to eradicate hunger. Ito lang po ang pamamaraan kung paano natin masusolusyonan ang problema sa kahirapan at kagutuman sa Pilipinas. Pag wala po tayong sistema, I think you know this, Chair, because you're a very brilliant businessman also, na kinakailangan ng system, correct management and operation, and right monitoring, and the development of the ground level mechanism in order for the program to work. Hindi po pwedeng kanya-kanya o pachi-pachi like what our line agencies are doing right now. Although there's of course a coordination work, there should be somebody na kukumpas po kung paano tatakbo sa kabuuan ang eradikasyon ng hunger sa Pilipinas. Kung hindi po natin ito gagawin, mahihirapan po tayo na tanggalin ang kagutuman dito sa ating bansa. And I hope, Chair, na sana ito ay isulong natin hanggang Senado at paabutin sa Presidente para maayos ang problema natin sa Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ria. Well, with regards to yung kay acknowledgement ng nagawa ni Patricia noon, I believe we have colleagues in the House of Representatives that have already filed a resolution commending Ms. Patricia noon. Pagdating naman sa PNP, I believe ngayon from the actions of the PNP, nakita na rin natin that they are one with the community in seeing the spirit of bayanihan doon sa mga community pantries, as stated by General Calanoga earlier, through the initiative of General Eliazar, meron silang ni-launch na barangayanihan kung saan nag-establish ang PNP rin ng kanilang community pantry. Siguro this is a sign that they are one in recognizing the need of everyone to help the Filipino people, especially in this time of pandemic. With regards, tama rin yung sinabi mo that there should be action in terms of pursuing yung ating desire on zero hunger. I believe that under the Office of the President, he has established yung task force Zero Hunger. But as we mentioned, meron tayong panukala which we are pushing sa House, and which we also want the Senate to act on to ensure that there is a clear policy directive regarding doon sa ating goal to achieve zero hunger dito sa ating bansa.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I say
Yes,
Mr.
Senior
Chair,
Deputy Majority Leader Remulla, before I go to Kong Arlene. Yes, Senior Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ang pagtulong sa kapwa ay dapat bukal sa kalooban at hindi ito ginagawa upang ipaalam sa ibang tao. ang pagpapublicize ng pagtulong sa tao ay hindi magandang gawain. Kasi nagkakaroon na ng agenda, nakakaiba sa totoong spirit ng bayanihan. Pagka nagkaroon ng political agenda ang pagtulong sa tao, pagka nagkaroon ng pasikat, kailangan pinapaalam natin sa lahat na tayo po ay gumagawa ng kabutihan, ay parang hindi na rin tayo gumawa ng kabutihan. Kasi dapat yan, infectious dapat siya na nakikita, naramdaman na hindi nagiging bida ang kahit sino, kundi ang kapwa natin ay ating pinangangalagaan. Kaya ang akin lang pong nakahalata dito kasi ay parang may political agenda pa rin ang mga lumalabas na nagsasalita na iba sa atin dito. Parang ginagawa nila itong pagkakataon na ito para sisihin ng gobyerno. Nagkaroon lang tayo ng pandemya sa buong mundo at walang may gusto nito. Kaya sana po maging malinaw na ang pagtulong sa tao ay bukal sa kalooban, hindi kinakailangan na magpasikat tayo, hindi kailangan na ipaalam. At kung nagkaroon man ng isang insidente kay Patricia noon, ay marahil tingnan natin kung bakit. Kasi minsan ang mga alagad ng batas, may information yan, may intelligence information sila na kailangan konektado sa kanilang ginagawa. Kung merong paggalaw, halimbawa, nagkaroon ng pantry, nag-ipon-ipon ng tao, walang health protocol na inobserve, ay magkakaproblema talaga. Incidentally, kung yung identity ng tao ay meron siyang record sa alagad ng batas, sabihin natin na isang member ng isang radical organization, hindi na natin kasalanan yon. Yan po ay trabaho nila, nagsugpuin ang mga kalaban ng bayan. Di ba? Ganun po yun eh. Kaya sana po, tandaan natin, ang bayanihan, ang pagtulong sa kapwa, ay hindi dapat pinagyayabang. At panahon ng pandemya, tigilan na natin ang pagsisisi sa gobyerno. Sabihin na lang natin kung ano pa ang kinakailangan gawin. Para naman ginagawa natin, political agenda natin, sobra-sobra na. Di ba kayo nahihiya niyan na pinupoliticize nyo ang isang bagay na wala naman may gusto mangyari? Yun po ang akin eh. Parang, bakit pa natin pinapalaki ang kakulangan ng gobyerno? Alam naman natin na mahirap humarap sa isang pandemya. May mga limitasyon talaga tayo. Bansa na hindi pinakaman na bansa, may kakulangan tayo sa mga salapi na kailangan gugulin upang matulungan ang lahat ng tao. Laging kukulangin ang tulong ng gobyerno. Hindi ito sosobra, lagi po itong kulang. Pero kung ang agenda natin ay politika, sige, punahin nyo ng punahin. Pero alamin natin na ang agenda ito ay talagang pumumulitika upang sirain lang ang gobyerno. Dapat sa panahon ng pandemya, tigilan muna natin ito, di ba? Yan po ang aking concern, Mr. Chairman. Sana po, health protocol ang ating observe pagdating po sa mga pandemya at yung mga nagpapasikat sa social media na sila'y tumutulong, yan po dapat pagdudahan pa natin. Yan po ang sa akin. Salamat po.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senior Deputy Majority Leader Boying Remulla. Now, may I go to
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Kong Franz, si Kong Arlene, i-recognize ko.
Okay, sige. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair. Babalikan ko po sana yung pinag-uusapan natin kasi I believe yung pinag-uusapan po natin yung usapin ng yung nagawa ng DSWD. I have a few questions pa kasi doon sa DSWD. Bago po natin talaga masolusyonan yung mga problema, dapat po meron tayong mga data, di ba? Dapat alam natin kung ano yung mga pinangahawakan natin. And very honest dapat yung ating mga institutions and agencies to tell kung ano talaga yung nangyari at ano yung kanilang programang ginagawa para masolusyonan. Kasi hindi po pwede na hindi natin masusolusyonan ang problema kung hindi naman sila magsasabi kung ano talaga yung mga programa na ginawa nila. Ang tanong ko po sa DSWD kanina, si Yusek Laksa po ba yata yung kanina, no, Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair, yung sa feeding program, paano na-ensure sa mga bata nag-stay at home sila? Tapos sinabi kanina na hot meals yung sinuserve sa communities. And merong data na 1.8 million. Ilan po yung bata na nangangailangan ng feeding? Ibig sabihin, mula po nung walang pandemya at nung pandemya, paano nag-step up ang DSWD para mag-serve ng hot meal, mag-serve sa mga bata na kids at home. Tapos, paano po nila ito ginagawa samantalang hindi operational yung mga daycares? At ano pong range ng mga bata na nabigyan? Delikado po ito kasi malnutrition yung aabuti ng mga bata natin kung hindi sila talaga mabibigyan ng sapat na pagkain, Mr. Chair. At yan po yung susunod nating henerasyon. Kapag sinabi po natin or hindi natin alam kung ano yung actual data ngayon ng DSWD, kailangan pong masagot ng DSWD itong mga programa na ito. Importante pong malaman ng taong bayan kung ano yung kalagayan. Siguro Mr. Chair, pwede pa po ba nating pasagutin ang DSWD?
Miss Laksa, andito pa yata si Miss Laksa.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ang naging strategy po kasi natin sa Hello, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Go ahead.
Ang naging strategy po kasi natin in the supplementary feeding program in response dun po sa katanungan ni Congresswoman po is house to house delivery ng mga food that includes yung hot meal pati nga po yung tinatawag nating dry ration. So ang naging strategy po is that for the whole week, isang hot meal po ang ating i-distribute na nakapack na po yon. So kukunin either i-distribute po ng ating mga barangay officials and daycare workers or yung mga parents po na mga bata ay pupunta doon sa daycare para kunin po yung hot meal. Kasama na po doon yung isang linggong dry ration po nating tinatawag na kakainin po ng bata. So ganun po ang naging strategy natin. Pero yun nga po, Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, dahil twice a day feeding po tayo, so times 2 na pagkain po ang dala-dala po ng mga magulang pag-uwi po nila doon sa bahay, Mr. Chair.
Siguro, Miss Laksa, kasama nung mga hiningi nating documents earlier, isama mo na rin yan para magkaroon tayo ng may bigay ko rin kay Kong Arlene yung breakdown nung natulungan nyo at siguro from there they could verify. Now,
yes po, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Congresswoman Beng Abueg Saldivar, who is with us, and Congresswoman Luisa Cuaresma. Now,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
mag-react lang ako doon kasi 1.8 million lang ang naibigay nila sa population ng mga bata. Ilan po ang population ng mga bata natin? Napakaliit po ng porsyento na yon. At ang tanong ko po, paano nag-step up?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should ask Ms. Ilagan about it, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Maybe
Ms. Ilagan?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yung question, please.
Talking about 1.8
yung tinatanong ko
million.
ni
Yes, sir.
Congresswoman Rosas, itanong natin kay Congresswoman Ilagan.
Opo.
Kasi sa'yo mas mataas ang katungkulan sa Commission on Human Rights.
Hindi po siya sa Commission on Human Rights,
DSWD.
Mr. Chairman.
Sa DSWD. Pasensya na ho. Sa DSWD.
Yes, Congresswoman Ilagan, please.
Yes. Maraming salamat po. Lilinawin po natin, ang supplemental feeding program ay hindi para sa lahat ng bata. Ito po ay para sa mga bata na hindi pa nag-aaral because the DepEd is another agency that has its own program to provide feeding to our school children. So ito po ay para dun sa mga daycare centers. Ngayon, if you need the data for all the regions that have implemented this. Remember, we have 16 regions, no? Hindi lang NCR. We can provide that if it is necessary, but let me be clear, hindi po ito para sa lahat ng bata. So if you're looking for data that we give to all the children, that would be misleading. We give only to those who are not yet in schooling age. Yan lang po, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, maraming salamat kay DSWD Yusek Luz Buminda Ilagan, ang amin pong kasama sa Gabriela before, thank you sa sagot niya. Mr. Chair, we appreciate yung effort na humanap nung kunin yung data ng lahat. Now, I am reiterating, Mr. Chair, na yung step-up program ng DSWD, yun siguro yung kailangan nating malaman, Mr. Chair. So maaari po sana if kaya ng DSWD maibigay iba pang mga details ng program para pang step up nila sa feeding program, kung may difference ito ng before na ginagawa at ngayon or during the pandemic na ginagawa ngayon. Kasi supplemental, I believe ang sinasabi ni Yusek, supplemental feeding insufficient siya. Parang gano'n Mr. Chair, insufficient siya sa ngayon. So ibig sabihin insufficient yung programa na yon. At paano pa ginawa ng gobyerno ang kanyang tungkulin para ma-address yung pandemic response na kailangan, Mr. Chair. Yon, maraming salamat Mr. Chair doon sa And Mr. Chair, gusto ko lang sabihin na siguro yung usapin ng pag-publicize, na huwag i-publicize ng mga organizers yung kanilang effort. In my opinion, Mr. Chair, insulto po sa mga organizers yun Kasi yung mga organizers gusto nila na makatulong at mapalawak yung nalalaman, Mr. Chair, ng ating mga mamamayan kung saan sila pupunta. At malaking bagay po ngayon yung Facebook at saka yung iba pang mga social media platforms para mapalawak yung kaalaman ng ating mamamayan. Kaya sa tingin po natin, Mr. Chair, we should encourage nga to publicize para nang sa ganun, malaman kung saan malapit po na makapagbigay. Kasi kahit gulay lang po yan, kapag kailangan ng ating mamamayan, pupuntahan talaga yan, Mr. Chair. So, yun po, gusto nating sabihin na hindi po yun pasikat. Hindi yun pasikat sa lahat, sa katulad ng sinasabi ng ating butining Senior Deputy Minority. Majority. Dapat lang po na-encourage pa natin yung mga community pantry organizers na malaman yung kanilang mga efforts at ginagawa. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kong Arlene.
So,
maraming salamat.
Mr. Chair, dagdag lang ako
Kong Franz, sandali lang yes. Before I recognize you, kasi kanina pa tataas ng kamay si General Paralde. General Paralde, may statement po kayo?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. But before I make my statement, actually po, meron akong maliit na presentation, but I'd like to, if you're okay, can we ask Yusek Katura first to speak for us, for the NTF, sir? Thank you.
Yes, Yusek Katura, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Congressman.
Okay.
I have a PowerPoint presentation. May I be allowed to share my presentation, please?
Yes, please do so.
Okay, nakikita po ng lahat?
Opo.
Okay, sige po. Maraming salamat po muli sa inyo at maraming salamat sa pagbibigay unlak sa akin ni General Parlade. Anyway, to the members of the committee, especially po sa inyo, Chairman Representative Suntay at sa mga iba pang mga members ito, this meeting, other guests who have already enriched this morning's discussion as well as all the others who will further be presenting. Magandang umaga po muli. Now, bago ang lahat, gusto ko pong i-extend muna ng apologies ni Undersecretary Badoy, the person who this committee sent this invitation initially, as she cannot be here. Meron po siyang activity sa Davao del Norte na siya po mamuno sa pag-organize. Anyway, I was trusted to take her place in this meeting as the issue at hand concerns human rights, which is among the 3 core focus areas of my work as spokesperson for the NTF-LCAC. With the other 2 being peace process and international affairs, with the latter referring to how the issue of human rights advocacy and the quest for a just and lasting peace in the Philippines may be, or rather must be, conveyed before the international community. Now, having said that, hindi ko rin po kinakalimutan na ako pong Executive Director of the Presidential Human Rights Committee Secretariat. So I also wear that hat as a participant in this morning's event. Anyway, today's agenda seeks to look into, and I quote, the emergence of community pantries as relief mechanism for the protection of the economic, social, and cultural rights of the people during the COVID-19 pandemic. But let me break down this topic into three major areas for discussion. The first is the state's obligation to promote, protect, and fulfill our people's economic, social, and cultural rights, which are not simply provided under the relevant constitutional provisions, specifically in Articles 11 to 15, but also under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, to which our country became a state party in 1974. Now, under this covenant, let me mention some of the ECOSOC rights that are relevant for today's discussion. These are the rights interspersed in Article 16 to 15, such as the right to the protection of the family, with special mention of mothers and their children, the right to an adequate standard of living, specifically the right to food, and the right to the benefits of culture. And as all rights ought to be guaranteed by the state, ECOSOC rights must be guaranteed without discrimination whatsoever, such as the usual race, creed, sex, etc. differences, and including differences in political opinions as well. However, unlike civil and political rights, the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of ECOSOC rights are allowed to be progressively realized depending on the capacity of the state's resources to ensure the fulfillment of these rights within a reasonable period of time. And finally, these rights must be exercised with the end in view of promoting the general welfare in a democratic society. This last qualification bears keeping in mind. Now, the second is the compelling need to promote, protect, and fulfill ECOSOC rights under this difficult time of the pandemic. Just so that's released in April of last year, which underlined the challenges that remain present to this day. The report cited three rights issues that need special attention under the pandemic. The first is the people's right to life and the state's duty to protect life, including by addressing the general conditions in society that give rise to direct threats to life. Now, the two other issues do not have a larger bearing in our discussion today, but let me just mention them: the people's right to health and the right to access healthcare, and the people's freedom of movement. The report also forwards certain key human rights-based directions that the most relevant for our discussion today are as follows. The first of this direction, is dealing with the economic and social impact of the pandemic, even as the state must continually reinforce its public health response. States must effectively act to mitigate the worst impacts on jobs, livelihoods, access to basic services and family life, and protect people's lives, mentioning further situations of food insecurity that have risen to unprecedented levels. The second is ensuring that all interventions must be conscious of that human rights adage of leaving no one behind. Now, these interventions must be inclusive, equitable, and universal, especially so of the presence of so-called underlying structural inequalities in society. And the third is adopting, again, another human rights adage, and we all know this: nothing about us without us. Government must open the field for greater participation from its people to combat the pandemic. And effective participation requires that people are informed, involved in decisions that affect them, and to ensure that all interventions are necessary, hence the transparency and accountability that government observes as it does its work. Now, having discussed these two subjects, let me now move on to the third and final area of discussion, which is the emergence of community pantries. That is, how this form of intervention is deemed a relief mechanism for the protection of ECOSOC rights in the midst of the pandemic. Let me stress four key takeaways on the matter. The first is, the name community pantry may be new, but the concept is not. Community pantries under various names such as community grocery, feeding programs, kindness kitchen, food banks, parish outreach mission, social service for the poor, habag kainan, etc. have been in operation long before the pandemic. And these were continued, especially so at the start of the pandemic last year, given the difficult life our people started to face. These were done by individuals, communities, social civic organizations, churches, in fact, both the expressway. Now, these interventions were done by these groups without fanfare, in an orderly fashion, without any media hype, and most importantly, without any hint at demeaning government for alleged failure in governance, notwithstanding the fact that the government has called for succor for people participation in an effort to assuage the impoverished conditions of the poor and needy. Note also that not at no instance has any of the organizers of these pantry similar programs I mentioned included an agenda of gathering and questions this government's moral ascendancy to remain in authority. In short, the government has failed its people. And for good measure, there were also reports received from the people themselves that petition signatures from the government against the government were being asked of them in return for food. Mr. Chair, gusto ko pong i-clarify ito. Yung pong pag-identify doon sa mga taong behind the community were not done by government, by the people themselves who were questioning bakit po kami nakapila dito at pinapipirma ang nakapalit ang pagkain. At ito po rin, Mr. Chair, sumabog po ang isyong ito sa media because it was not government that started it. It came from a report from Channel 5 na nagpapakita po doon may mga footages na meron pong dinidistribute ng mga flyers po yung organizers. No. In the same vein, there have yet to be a church relief missions at alam ko po yan because I am the head of the Social and Human Development Ministry of our Diocesan Shrine and Parish in Marikina City. I have yet to see and learn of a church relief mission undertaken for the sole purpose of demeaning other churches for failure to attend to their flux needs and in the end calling for the beneficiaries' conversion. Yung pong Iglesia ni Cristo, wala po tayong nabalitaan na nagkaroon sila ng kanilang sariling community pantry na sinasabi nila, oh kaya kami nandito dahil palpak ang mga Katoliko. O kaya kayo dapat dito na kayo sa amin. So ang motivation po yan ay tunay lamang makatulong. Now second, the government has been conducting its own version of community pantry in marginalized communities, not only in relation to the pandemic, but the need for such in communities that were greatly affected by the natural calamities na mentioned po kanina ni DSWD Undersecretary that have brought havoc in our country last year. These are through programs undertaken. Hindi ko na po babanggitin ito kasi marami po nabanggit ang DSWD, ang ating PNP, AFP. Although ang AFP po meron siyang sinasabi yung kanyang kapwa ko, sagot ko at yung kanyang Raise 1 Million Gardens in the National Capital Region. No? At meron na po marami siyang mga nabanggit po dito. Kaya po ito nakakalungkot din, ano? Marami pong tumatawag. Si Patricio daw po ay dapat mabigyan ng parangal sa Kongreso. Wala pong problema diyan, dibigyan po siyang parangal. But I also want that the leaders of the church that were able to do their own very, very laudable pandemic be commended by Congress. No? Kahit wag na po kami kahit wag na po yung armed forces na PNP kasi kasama po sa trabaho nila, kahit wag na po ang DSWD, pero sana bigyan din ng parangal yung ibang mga communities na matagal na pong gumagawa nito na walang media fanfare, walang hype. Ito po yung mga nasa simbahan na patuloy na tumutulong. No? And third, the government welcomes the community pantry as it sees it as a vehicle for people participation in the government's campaign to uplift the daily struggle of the poor to access food in these difficult times. Government acknowledges how the community pantry has inspired many other groups and communities to do the same. Nabanggit ko nga po ito kanina. Without any motivation other than the kindness and generosity of their hearts to serve those who are in need in these difficult times. But the government wishes that its organizers shall never forget to ensure the observance of health protocols. On the overall, the government regards the pantry as a concretization of one of the greatest virtues that define Filipino character, which is bayanihan. However, Mr. Chair, and this is the fourth, the government is saddened that the Filipinos' capacity of overextended kindness and generosity exemplified in the bayanihan has been used for some political ends by some groups. And there are numerous proofs of this. Kanina po may nabanggit, totoo po na mayroong mga foreign reports that acknowledge bayanihan. But if you really read more into these reports, read how the pantry was reported, it was reported not as a reflection of the Philippines' virtue of bayanihan, but of the government's alleged incompetence and ineptitude, something for the world to either laugh at, to cringe at, or to pillory as for. Ito po ang nakakalungkot, Mr. Chair. Bakit meron po tayo mga kababayan na mas gusto pa yata na pinapahiya tayo pag lumalabas ang bansa ang kanilang dinadalang skill set, ang Pilipinas ay palpak na bansa. Hindi mo lang ipakita ang kabutihan na ginagawa ng ating pamahalaan. Ito po, masama po ang aking talagang kalooban kasi po ako matagal na sa gobyerno. 33 years na po ako sa gobyerno at ako po'y gumagawa ng maayos. At pag lumalabas po tayo ay napakapangit ng imahe ng Pilipinas, lalong-lalo na sa human rights. Maiba po tayo. Alam mo, nalulungkot nga po ako, Mr. Chair. Kayo po ba naniniwala na kada 2 araw daw po may pinapatay ditong bata sa Pilipinas? Maniwala po ba kayo? Yan po ang narrative doon. Anyway, ayaw ko na pong banggitin yon. Babalikan ko po yung ating bayanihan. The much loved Filipino virtue bayanihan has been so bastardized that a serious human rights advocate can only deem this act as an affront and an insult to Filipino culture. In the overall context of ECOSOC rights, this does not contribute at all in promoting the general welfare of society and must be addressed accordingly. Yan po nabanggit ko kanina. We need to go back to the salient features of ECOSOC rights. In summary, Mr. Chair, the Philippines is a state party to the ICCR and as such strongly adheres to what the instrument compels the state to do effectively promote, protect, and fulfill the people's economic, social, and cultural rights. Second, the need to reinforce adherence to ECOSOC rights is made more pronounced in this time of the pandemic. We are aware of this because even as the US reminds us of all its member states to do so, there is a global response to the pandemic. And we are proud, Mr. Chair, that given even the limitations of our resources, we've been able to do well. Hindi naman problema ito ng Pilipinas lamang, problema po ito ng lahat ng bansa. At kung i-compare po natin ang ginawa natin sa time of pandemic, I think we are at par with many of the countries, even much better even with the developed countries in the world. Tayo po, hindi pa tayo nakaranas ng kanilang complete lockdown. Kahit paano po maayos tayo, may mga tao pa rin tayo na sumusunod. May mga tao pa rin tayo na sumusuporta sa gobyerno. And third, Mr. Chair, the government welcomes all the support from like-minded sector of society in the campaign to uplift the lives of our people in these difficult times. So long as such support, and by the way, Mr. Chair, when I mention sector of society, I include even those behind the organizers of the community pantry. And so long as such support reinforces the beauty of the Philippines bayanihan spirit and does not use and abuse the same for some political ends, or use the same to blame, shame government and the Filipinos in general before the international community. And it should contribute to what the ICCR itself qualifies as promoting the general welfare in a democratic society and not foment hatred, distrust against anyone or any group or the government. Thank you for your kind attention, Mr. Chair, and all the members of this committee. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Yusek Noy. Maraming salamat sa iyong presentation. And I also believe that it is clear, one thing is clear, that we are all in this together. We all have to work hand in hand to help our people. At ako rin naman ay naniniwala doon sa sinabi mo that in this time of pandemic, we should do everything that we can to reach out to others and not to put anyone down. So maraming salamat sa presentation.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Kong Lo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief, quick reaction, Mr. Chair, and perhaps a few questions. Number one, Mr. Chair, gusto ko sabihin na kinikilala natin ang lahat ng efforts ng ating pamahalaan, ng iba't ibang ahensya ng ating pamahalaan sa pag-respond dito sa unprecedented crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. And nakikita naman natin yun sa lahat ng fronts. Meron talagang mga seryosong efforts ng ating pamahalaan. Ganun pa man, I also agree with the Deputy Majority Leader, Senior Deputy Majority Leader Boying Dimulya, na kahit meron tayong aggressive, concrete efforts on the part of government, ang mga efforts nito ay may mga limitations, may mga kakulangan, lalo na sa usaping pondo, sa usaping access, for example, sa vaccines, kahit meron tayong serious efforts, aggressive efforts at expediting our vaccination program, pero dahil sa may problema sa access, immediate availability, medyo nadi-derail ng kaunti ang ating vaccination program. In other words, Mr. Chair, while kinikilala natin itong mga efforts na to, we should also recognize the fact that there are limitations, that are there, inherent na mga limitations, may mga limitations na caused by other factors, at perhaps the emergence of community pantries would not have happened if there is already enough or more than enough provision for food para sa ating mga mamamayan. Lumalabas naman ng mga initiatives na to dahil people are stepping up coming in to contribute at tumulong. So may mga niraise na kasi si Yusek kanina, for example, na yung bastardization ng community pantry, bastardization ng bayanihan spirit na tinatawag. But I'd like to ask, number one, when Patricia noon started the Maginhawa Community Pantry, alam naman siguro natin that was not publicized. At least not on the part of the initiator, Patricia noon. May mga nakakita doon sa initiative, kinuha ng picture, pinost sa social media, and it became viral. But it was never the intention of the organizer to publicize that little initiative that she had. The beauty of it is that that little initiative created an inspiration, inspired a lot of people, and nagkaroon ng naging contagious yun at marami na ang nag-initiate nito. Now, as a question, Mr. Chair, ilan na ba so far ang nangyaring community pantries, hindi lang sa Metro Manila kundi sa buong bansa? At least may data naman tayo niya. At ilan dito ang may record tayo na pinablicize yung community pantry at ginamit as a vehicle to demean government for its failures.
Yusek Noy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Congressman Fortune, for that question. Una po sa lahat ganito, tama po kayo, kinikilala natin na yung community pantry ay nagkaroon siya ng pag-i-inspire sa ibang mga communities. Tama po 'yan. Wala pong masama diyan. In fact, sinasabi nga natin dito, napakaganda na nakapag-inspire siya ng ibang mga tao na walang ibang motibasyon kundi ma-inspire lamang dahil sa kanilang personal kindness and generosity. But many of them also do not know ang pinanggalingan, kung saan nanggaling itong one community pantry ito. By the way, I would like to refute po yung sinabi ni Congressman Fortune na walang publication, kasi po sa totoo lang meron po nakita tayong mga picture sa media, sa social media, nakataas kamao pa yung si Patricia noon. Alam niyo po, gusto natin balikan. Alam niyo, ito pong ginagawa natin dito. Kaya nga palagi in-emphasize ko dito, decisions of government are not made in a vacuum. Tayo po ay nakikinig. Kagaya po ng Kongreso, kayo po ay nakikinig sa sentimento ng mga tao. Pag kayo po gumagawa ng batas, pinaparinggan nyo niya because nothing about them without them. Ganun din po, nung pumunta yung mga kapulisan doon, nagka-question, ito po ay pag-respond sa reklamo ng mga tao na bakit daw sila ay pinapapirma. Yun po ay sabi na, ito po ay pwede pong ito ma-confirm ito ng ating mga kapulisan dito. Meron daw pong petition signing na kinokondena ang ating pamahalaan. So ito po yung ginagawa ng isang grupo. Tama po 'yan. These are the inside stories na nangyayari sa isa. Hindi po natin alam kung anong nangyayari sa ibang grupo. At sigurado po ako, hindi ko alam kung anong nangyayari sa pangkalahatan, may sinabi po kanina si General Caranogan na it does be able to inspire around 46 at other areas all over the country. Pero nga, sa totoo lang, may nakuha po ako na sinasabi ng isang evangelical group, it was able to inspire about 400 others. Kaya although ang sinasabi nga nung mga pastor doon, mabuti nga hindi ka pareho ito nung nag-umpisa. So tama po yan. May halaga po yung ginawa nila doon. And we recognize them. We recognize it. But when the people started complaining, the government has to respond. Kasi po pag binabaliwala natin dito, alam naman po nito ni Congressman Suntay, pag hindi po tayo makinig sa sinasabi ng gobyerno, sinasabi ng mga tao, lalong-lalo na pa ito may kinalaman sa ating peace and security, we are actually po committing violations of human rights because we are actually disregarding the right of people to live in a society that is peaceful. So ini-equate po nila yan naitutuhog-tuhog na lang kasi marami pong nauna na dyan, sinasabi na nila na itong grupong ito ay sila ay kasabat ng itong ganitong grupo. So natutuhog-tuhog na po ng mga tao. So sila na nag-provide ng information sa atin. So we need to respond to that. if only to address the people's right, no, to seek for peace, to seek for development. So ito po yun, dun po ang pinapanggalingan natin. Dun sa tanong ni Congressman Fortun, kung may alam po ba ako kung yung ibang grupo ba na sumunod dun sa grupo ni petition ay nagkaroon ng pagkakataon na mag-media hype, magkaroon ng ano po, hindi ko po alam. Most likely sasabihin ko po, hindi po nagkaroon ng ganun. That it would only take one example to really blow it to sky high. No? And it has happened. Ngayon po, I would dare say, mag-open po kayo ng Google, hanapin niyo po community pantry in the Philippines. Chances are, it will be reports on the Philippines' alleged incompetence and ineptitude to address poverty, food security in the midst of the pandemic. Hindi man lang na po napapalabas na Filipinos. Meron po ako nakita, pero in passing lamang. No? Parang pa-start lamang sinabi ni people coming together, sharing their spirit and kindness. However, there's a sudden twist on the report. This is a response to the ineptitude and incompetence of the Philippine government to rise in response to the people's needs in these difficult times. Ito po yung nangyayari. Kaya sana po nasagot ko po, Congressman Lo, ang aking yung pong concern. Pasensya na po kung hindi ko na nasagot ng maigi.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Comfortun.
Hindi ko po nakuha lahat kasi nawala ako and I had to reconnect. Anyway, Mr. Chair, ang gusto naman natin sabihin is that that initiative snowballed into a lot of other community pantries and other similar initiatives around the country. And rather delve on the, mas nakita natin yung inspiration that it created. And it's beautiful in the sense that it has demonstrated the capacity of the Filipino to step up in times of crisis, to be of help to other people. And kaya gusto kong malaman dun sa datos, dun sa mga sumunod na mga community pantries, ilan ba dito ang ginamit na bihikulo para siraan ang gobyerno? Sa aking pagkakaalam, kung meron man, iilan. But most, if not all, of the community pantries that emerged, not only in Metro Manila but around the country, ay well-meaning naman ang intentions ng mga nag-initiate nito. At in-encourage natin na more of these initiatives would follow dahil nga bagamat, kasi hindi naman masamang sabihin natin may mga limitations talaga ang efforts ng ating gobyerno. It's not bad to admit that while there are efforts, and we can see the efforts, and we acknowledge that, and we are thankful for these efforts, but it's not bad to admit that there are really limitations. So that's why hindi lahat ay natutugunan natin. Dahil may mga kakulangan tayo lalo na sa usaping pondo. Hindi naman talaga sapat ang ating pondo para bigyan ang lahat. Kahit may interventions tayo sa bayanihan 1, 2, and itong 3 ngayon, alam din natin na our limitations as to resources ay nagiging dahilan para hindi lahat ng issues dito sa pandemic ay matutugunan natin. At mahalaga na pumapasok itong mga ganitong efforts. And siguro tingin ko lang, while we understand na merong efforts ng gobyerno to curb insurgency, pero we should be very, very careful in our messaging. Na hindi natin sasagasaan ang lahat. Kasi ang nangyari kasi parang naratsada doon sa initial na messaging. And no less than the PNP in its initial presentation said that there were missteps in the beginning. So parang pa yung overreaction, instead of encourage more of these initiatives, resulted in the discouragement pa na pumasok sa ganito. Some of these community pantries at the start had to be suspended dahil dun sa mga initial measures na lumabas. So ang sa atin lang naman, balanse, kinikilala natin at nagpapasalamat tayo sa efforts ng gobyerno para tugunan ang pandemic na ito. Pero kilalanin din natin na may mga kakulangan dahil talagang meron namang mga limitations. Kahit nga the richest and most powerful of countries have been caught flat-footed by this pandemic. That's why hindi kaagad lahat epektibo natin na respondihan. And the actors that are taking advantage of the situation to forward their political agenda, kailangan tingnan din ng gobyerno yon. Pero let's be very careful in our measures, let's be very careful, especially in our messaging, na hindi naman natin ma-discourage ang ganitong efforts ng ating mga mamamayan. So ganoon naman, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your objective insights, Congressman Fortun. Thank you very much. Now, AFP, General Naknak, are you ready?
Mr.
General
Chair.
Panlade muna. General Panlade.
Mr. Chair, may I be allowed to respond to, I think that's also related because he questioned me also.
Oh, sige.
Ano lang,
Yusek Noy, then I'll go to General Panlade after.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much again, Congressman Fortun. Well, briefly, I just want to clarify. Government has never said that it will not need the help of anyone. In fact, ang government po mismo ang nauna na sinabi natin, hindi natin kaya ito. Kaya nga po, ang talagang bukang bibig ng government is whole of nation. Kasi we are under very difficult circumstances. Nakakaiba po ito. This has never happened in our lifetime, no? Hindi pa po, there's no precedent on this. So from the very start, sinabi na agad ng ating Pangulo, ng ating pamahalaan na we need all the help we can get. So ito po, we welcome them. No, tama po yung sinasabi, we welcome everyone. They can come in, they can help. Pero tama rin po sinasabi nyo na meron din tayo kasi mga tinitingnan ng mga problema sa lipunan. And we also need to be very critical, quote-unquote critical, but we also need to be very cautious. Tama po yan. And then finally po, gusto ko lang banggitin kasi ulit-ulit na naman po na nababanggit naman na ito po ang malungkot dito, kasi naisasama yung katagang red tagging. Again po, gusto kong sabihin na the government has never red tagged anyone. What it only has is to simply affirm kung ano yung sinasabi mismo ng isang head ng isang grupo who have been identified as a communist. No? Inuulit sinasabi lamang natin po yan. Sila po ang nagbibigay ng kahulugan ng red tag, tayo po hindi. No? Ano yung babalikan ko po, kung meron man may nagreklamo na nag-red tag sa kanila, ito po yung mga tao na sinasabi na bakit po kami ganito? Bakit po kami pinipirma? Bakit po kami pinapapirmang petisyon? No? So babalikan ko po, tayo po ay humihingi ng tulong mula sa lahat. We have always welcomed community pantries by any other name. Sabi ko nga, napakalawak po yan. May kindness kitchen, merong yan. Ngayon ang police, may baranggayanihan. So we welcome din po, so long as it really moves us forward, and according to ECOSOC rights, it should be able to promote the general welfare in a democratic society. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Yusek Noy. I'll go now to General Parlade and then yung presentation ng AFP. General, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a rejoinder to everything that has already been mentioned by Yusek Atura, sa lahat ng mga nagsalita kanina. But I have a very short presentation, sir, if you don't mind. Yes. Can you share our slide, please? Para lang magkaroon ng picture yung mga binabanggit kanina na Yusek Atura. Don't worry, sir, I'm not going to tackle all the slides here. But I just want to emphasize on a few points. I'll start with this timeline. Timeline, sir. I'll start with this timeline, Mr. Chair. Okay, next. Community Pantry last 14 April. Pero hinayaan lang natin because really, we were impressed with this activity, with this project. So we just monitored it. 17 April, marami nang naglabasan. And then finally, 19 April, marami pong netizens ang nag-post. Maraming netizens nagpo-post sa atin. They're asking us, why are there propaganda materials in these community pantries? That is why we discussed this with the NTF-LCAC. So nagkaroon po ng exchanges doon sa aming Viber chat. And I'm going to show you another next slide, please. So this is exactly what I posted, sir, on April 19. And I just want to bring your attention to those highlighted. That's inviting and baiting us to red tag them. So we should be careful. So sabi ko, sir, I agree that we need to check. It's time that the DILG, PNP, and the AFP should monitor these activities, but exercise extreme caution. So yung mga words po natin na ginagamit, caution and then monitor, hindi po yun profiling. So anyway, ito na po yung sequence of events. Next slide please. As you can see, ito na po pinlay up na ito ng Rappler, na Inquirer. Again, pinalaki nila, talagang sinensationalize nila yung issue. They use terms like profiling, they use terms like red tagging. So paulit-ulit doon sa red tagging. Next slide. Okay, I'll skip this slide. Madalas na natin itong nakikita. This is the start of it. Last 14 April. Next slide po. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So this is what this is what took our attention. Marami nang nagpo-post po about these propaganda activities of some groups like KMU and then yung Anak Pawis and some other organizations. So this is what actually caught our attention. And then there's this TV news of TV5. Yun, talagang may video sila niyan. Next slide po. Actually, Mr. Chair, marami doon sa mga kapitbahay mo, mga kababayan mo dyan sa Maginhawa Street, ang nag-report sa amin, sa akin personally. Sabi nila, General, please take a look at this community pantry. At alam namin, common ito dito sa area na ito kasi nandito yung mga NGOs na sinusuportahan ng mga international communities. Nandito, marami sila dito sa paligid namin. Kaya alam namin itong mga ganitong activities. So alam ko po yun, Mr. Chair, na itong mga activities na ito ay ginagawa nila for fundraising. Kaya ito, kilalang-kilala sa ibang bansa and they needed to promote this outside sa ibang bansa. Because of that, yung fundraising po. Fundraising talaga ang isa sa mga objective ng mga grupong ito. Next slide. I won't play that video anymore. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So yung po kanina, yung sinasabi ni Yusek Katura, nagpapapirma sila ng blank documents. That's why we told the police, please check this. Check, not profile, but please check these activities. Bakit mayroong mga blankong papel? Sige, next slide please. Next slide. Ito po, isang patunay na yung mga fundraising na yan ay totoo. This is one coming from This is coming from one of the members of as early as 2017. Yung Sernet po na yan, they were able to generate 5.7 billion in 2011 alone. So we are really watchful of these organizations, especially kung ang napupuntahan itong mga fundraising na ito ay hindi sa magandang objective or agenda. So yan po, the next slide. These are just some of our statements and we just want to clarify that we just want our people to be careful. Huwag silang pipirmang-pirma ng kung ano-ano. And of course, we made it very, very clear na ang layunin nito ni Patricia noon may be good but we should be watchful kasi madami-daming organisasyon tulad nga ng nabanggit ko yung Anak Pawis and KMU. Of the 46, I think yung tinatanong kanina po ni Congressman Fortun, I think of the 46, 3 doon ang nakita namin na merong mga agitation, may propaganda materials. The rest of them wala namang problema. And true enough, nung challenge po ako in one of my interviews, sabi niya, sir, bakit nyo red tag itong mga grupong ito? I said, no, we don't red tag them. But we are just warning. Ikaw hindi. You know, you can check tomorrow. As long as the government is doing its job, in-explain sa mga taong bayan kung bakit namin ginagawa ito, I think that will encourage more people. Kasi this time, klaro sa kanila na pinoproteksyonan ng gobyerno ang mga ganitong initiative. And true enough po, the following day, 400 na yung community pantries nationwide. And the following week, umabot na ata sa 2,000. I think the PNP can validate this. Right now, there are around 2,100 community pantries po sa buong Pilipinas. Next slide po. Just to show you that we've been doing this community pantries. Next slide. Hindi lang po ito ginagawa namin after nung itong community pantry ni Patricia doon. Next slide. Ayan po. If you can see, as early as April last year, 2020 po, meron kami mga community pantries. Nagko-contribute ang inyong mga sundalo, 1-day mess, and then nasundan nito, 2 days mess. Binibigay po namin doon sa mga squatter area, doon sa Lucena. And in this slide, you can see na hindi po pagkain lang ang binibigay natin. Kung hindi, tinuturuan natin yung mga kababayan natin na magtanim, hindi po dole out. Huwag tayong umasa palagi sa gobyerno kasi hanggang saan lang yan. Yung hot meal na yan na may bibigay ng DSWD, hanggang saan lang yan. But turuan natin silang magtanim. May bakanteng lupa dyan, sa kapitbahay natin, sa village, kausapin natin yung barangay, yung village. Ayan, tumulong po yung Department of Agriculture, nabigyan kami ng mga seedlings at saka mga pananim. Ayan po ang ginawa natin. And then meron tayong ibang programa pa doon sa mga naapektuhan ng pandemic. Next slide po. Napakadami po ng mga pictures na yan. Just to emphasize to you, next slide. Just to emphasize to you that we are not doing this for anything but really to help our people. At hindi po yung agenda natin ay maganda. At hindi natin kinakailangang i-publicize ito. Ginagawa po yan ng mga kasundaluhan ng Solcom na walang mga advertisement. Ito po, sabi ko nga ang MCGI po, meron silang actually 2,000 na yan po. 2,000 community pantries or free grocery program sa buong Pilipinas. Wala tayong naririnig sa kanila, kundi patuloy lang silang nagbibigay ng tulong not only to the members of ang Dating Daan or MCGI but to other congregations. Welcome po sa kanila yung So sana ganito yung yung pagtulong, yung bayanihan, which is really this is what we call yung genuine na bayanihan. Sige, next slide po. So I think I'm going to stop there. Pare-parehas po yung mga slides na binibigay pinapakita namin just to show to you na yung suporta po ng gobyerno, ng Philippine National Police, ng Armed Forces at ibang agencies sa ating mga communities. Ino-augment pa natin yung mga civil society organizations na nag-organize ng mga ganitong activity nationwide po. So yun lang po, Mr. Chair, sana ma-resolve itong issue na ito. Red tagging, of course, sinabi na ni Sekatura yan, hindi po kami nagre-red tag. We are just informing our citizens that there are organizations using these activities in order to generate funding from abroad, from everywhere. And some of this funding goes to the armed struggle. So yun po ang iniiwasan natin. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Maraming salamat sa iyong clarification and presentation, General Parlade. Now, can we go to General General Nock, yung presentation ng AFP.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. This is Brigadier General Joel Naknak of the AFP Center for Armed Conflict. I'll be sharing my slides, sir. Firstly, sir, before that, while my staff is fixing it, let me just correct the statement of Ms. Ria Teves kanina. Sabi niya, ang AFP, ang military daw ay nag-apologize. I guess it was the PNP who apologized. So please place it on record, Mr. Chair. I would like to greet our distinguished members of the House of Committee, Honorable Committee on Human Rights, for this opportunity to present to you the actions of the AFP when it comes to the community pantries. But before that, medyo nag-Google po ako at nalaman ko na nag-start po pala itong concept ng community pantries way back as early as 1967 sa St. Mary's Food Bank in Arizona, USA. At ngayon po mayroong 60,000 food pantries around USA. Dito po sa Asia, meron din sa Hong Kong, nag-start po yan 2009. Sa Europe, 1984, ang first food bank nila. And since 1980, nag-spread na po all over the world. So ibig sabihin po nito, this is not a new idea. Okay. So the presentation will cover the following. Okay. As I will discuss to you the guidance laid out by our commanders up to the activities that we had for the past months. Next. These are our references for this presentation. Next slide. With the emergence of the community pantry, the SND or the National Defense Secretary has given his guidance that the AFP is directed to help community pantries nationwide and further direct all AFP units to donate goods and vegetables to the pantries. Next slide, please. Likewise, the AFP, through the guidance of our Chief of Staff, directed all the units like the Unified Commands, the Major Services, JTF NCR, who is in charge of the National Capital Region, to do the same, to support these pantries, to include the CRS and the Civil Military Regiment of the Philippine Army. Shown to you, sir, are some of our initiatives done in the previous months. This is under the Kapwa Ko Sagot Ko campaign. And the lines of efforts are or activities covers the mobile kitchen, community kitchen, pagkain sa walang bahay, ayoda, mag-aaral. So these are the wants to deliver the goods to the community. On the mobile kitchen, sir, you can if you can recall, since the start of the pandemic, nag-ooperate na po yung mobile kitchen natin ng AFP since April of 2020 rather. And recently, it was deployed in the following barangays in Quezon City, delivering food packs to our indigent communities within Quezon City. Next slide, please. So it shows the true spirit of Bayanihan, as this is not only the activity of the AFP, but rather in cooperation with other NGOs and also the local government units in the area. Okay, next. We also have this AFP Community Kitchen. This is spearheaded by the CRS, wherein they coordinated with Arellano University in Malabon to establish community kitchens, also in Nabotas and Valenzuela area. Next. Pagkain sa walang bahay is also an activity ng pagkain paminsan-minsan po pag nadaanan natin. Next. Ayuda sa pag-aaral, this is also another activity where in the University of Diliman, or University of Philippines in Diliman. Shown to you is the table that represents the activities of the different units of the AFP. So mapapansin po ninyo, marami pong beneficiaries na natulungan, and this is ongoing as we speak today. 31,214 beneficiaries po ang nabigyan natin sa mga natayong initiated community pantries po ng AFP nationwide. Next. Next slide, please. So other pictures of these activities are shown. Okay. Next. So as we do this, we coordinated with, of course, the local government, the barangay officials, the Department of Social Welfare, and the other operators of the pantries. Also, civil society organizations and NGOs were tapped to assist us in this activity. Parishes, religious organizations likewise were in assistance to the activities of the AFP, and likewise we provide assistance to all of these organizations. Next. Some recommendations, sir, for us to improve these pantries. First, we should coordinate with the local government officials, municipal as well as city officials, because they are in charge in the welfare, orderliness, as well as security of their localities. Mahirap po yung magkagulo dahil lang may bibigay na pagkain. And of course, we have to strictly observe the DOH and WHO health protocols para po hindi tayo magiging super spreader activity. And in conclusion po, the AFP shall continue to support the existence of the community pantries since it is a noble and worthy idea. However, we should be at all times be vigilant on the actions of scrupulous individuals and organizations who exploit the situation to arouse, organize, and mobilize our common people to breed hatred against legitimate authorities and the government. These actions will, with hidden agenda, destroys the spirit of bayanihan. Yan po ang aming presentation. Magandang umaga po.
Okay, maraming salamat, General Naknak. Thank you very much sa presentation ng AFP. I believe
Mr. Chair, just
yes,
a quick
Kong Arlene.
question, Mr. Chair. Oo. Mr. Chair, sa presentation ng AFP, may mga funds silang ginamit. Saang line item kinuha ng AFP yung ginamit nila dyan sa mga community pantries na sinasabi nila, Mr. Chair? Kasi I believe sa GAA 2021 natin, wala tayong nilagay dyan.
Mr. Chair, I can readily answer that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Bibigyan kita ng pagkakataon. Mr. Chair, kailangan ko lang itong sabihin. In fact, ang meron po ay 33 billion ang budget ng AFP modernization, 200 billion ang AFP funds, 200 billion plus ang AFP funds, and 9 billion ang intelligence funds. 19 billion po ang NTF LCAC fund. 3.83 billion lamang ang supplemental
pasagutin natin.
Supplemental feeding. Mas malaki pa po, Mr. Chair, yung 19 billion na NTF LCAC fund kesa sa 3.83 billion fund ng supplementary feeding. So, Mr. Chair, ang tanong ko po sa ang line item kinuha ng AFP itong ginagamit nila for the community pantry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
General, please answer the question.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Napakaganda po yung tanong ni Representative Rosas kasi maha-highlight po yung mga contributions ng mga non-government organizations, civic organizations na tumutulong po sa AFP. Marami po rito na sponsored ng mga iba't ibang civic organizations. Kami lang po yung instrument nila to deliver these goods. Just like po yung food, yung kitchen. Ang mga nagdo-donate po ng pagkain, hindi po AFP. Ang nagdo-donate po dyan, mga civic organizations. Yan po, sir.
So, hindi po public funds, Mr. Chair, yung ginamit para dito?
Meron akong sagot.
Sige, General Parlade, please.
Yes, pero contribution yon galing po sa subsistence allowance namin ng sundalo. Volunteer po yun, voluntaryo na kinontribute lang para maibigay sa community. So nasa GAA po yun, pero subsistence allowance sana namin yon, binigay namin sa kanila. Salamat po.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe one thing is very clear dito sa naging usapin natin with regards to the community pantries and the current situation dito sa ating bansa. First, that everyone, both government and the private sector, has to work together in order to address and to help our fellow countrymen. Dahil talagang Pilipinas, pero sa buong mundo. And we are all struggling to try to help our countrymen. Dito rin, nakita natin that there are various concerns which were raised, both on the side of the private sector and on the part of the government. Siyempre, on the part of the private sector na nag-establish nga ng community pantries, while we appreciate and we acknowledge na umusbong yung mga community pantries na nakakatulong sa ating mga kababayan dito, there are concerns by some of the organizers, yung safety concerns na sinasabi nga nila ay parang ang paniniwala nila ay nare-red dot sila. Now, dito rin nilabas ng gobyerno ang kanilang concern. Of course, both the PNP and the AFP has certain mandates and that is to maintain public order and safety. And of course, yung concern nila that totoo naman na maaaring mangyari that there may be groups who are using itong ganitong action in order to raise funds which is used against the government, which may be used against the government. Dito rin, kagaya ng usapin rin na ni-raise ni Senior Deputy Majority Leader kanina na kung sana tayo tutulong, maganda, welcome lahat ng tulong na maibibigay ng kahit anong sektor. Ngunit sa ating pagtulong, total tayong lahat naman ay Pilipino, wag na natin ito gamitin para siraan yung ating kapwa-tao. And this goes to both ways, hindi lang yung pagsira sa gobyerno at pagsira rin doon sa mga community organizers. Di ba? Ang importante naman dito, nagkakaisa at nagkakasundo tayo. Now, with regards to yung earlier concern raised, sinabi na ng PNP kanina na dito naman why there is no intention to red tag anyone, but of course there are certain health protocols which should be maintained, and I agree with you na dahil kailangan makontrol rin yung dami ng tao na pumipila o kumukuha doon sa mga community pantry, and we need the local government units to help facilitate and ensure that it is done in an orderly fashion. Siguro ang importante lang is yung maiayos yung messaging natin para hindi na may misconstrue on both sides. And doon sa mga siguro on the part ng both ng PNP, ng ating uniformed personnel, is we also have to be careful, kagaya ng nabanggit kanina, on what we post in our official web page. While hindi natin talaga maaawat yung mga komento na isasama doon sa web page, doon sa sa exchanges ng mga komento sa web page nga, ang importante hindi nagagaling yung statement doon sa nagiging official statement ng ating uniformed personnel, kung ano man yung nakakasira o maaaring ma-misconstrue ng mga ibang tao. Yung mga documents na lang which was requested, especially from the DSWD, kindly submit the same. Now we appreciate the presence of everyone who attended today's briefing, and we hope that yes, Rep. Sara.
Yes, Mr. Chair, good morning po. I still have questions for our resource speakers.
Okay, yung questions nyo before I end the hearing. Sige, kung Sara Ilago, please. Yung questions.
Yes. Opo, Chair Bong, pasensya na po at nagbabantay din po tayo ng hearing tungkol sa prohibition ng child marriage. Totoo po, no? Napaka-inspiring ng lahat ng mga efforts para po tumulong sa ating kapwa-tao, sa ating mga komunidad, lalo na po sa gitna ng pandemya, at napakatindi po ng krisis ng kawalan ng trabaho, ng kabuhayan, na nagpapatindi ng gutom sa ating bayan, at yung kanilang access dun sa basic social services talagang restricted din, limitado dahil dun sa varying levels pa ng community quarantine na kinakaharap natin sa iba't ibang mga lugar. No? Kaya lahat ng mga solidarity efforts, mga initiatives mula sa ating mga kababayan ay kinakailangan i-welcome natin at maiwasan na po natin yung nangyari na sinasabing mga missteps ng profiling, tagging, dahil po yan ay diskriminasyon doon sa mga tao na nagsisikap na makatulong. Ngunit dahil sa kanilang halimbawa po affiliation sa organization, o kaya naman yung sinabi kanina ng NTF-ELCAC, dahil nagtaas kamao, ay sila na po ay nakakaranas ng paglabag sa kanilang right to privacy, yung right nila against surveillance, at iba po na hindi pa pinapayagan o labag sa mga karapatang tao ng ating mga kababayan. Ang una pong katanungan, the PNP has acknowledged that there were missteps, apology has been made, but there must also be accountability. Na paimbestigahan na po ba natin on the ground itong mga reports ng profiling? At pangalawa po, sa parte naman ng DSWD at iba pang mga agencies na present dito, nagkaroon na rin po ba ng efforts to help yung mga nakakaranas po ngayon ng trauma dahil dun sa nangyari sa kanila na profiling, nahaharas talaga dun sa nangyari?
Who wants to answer that question?
May I answer, Mr. Chair, sir?
Yes, please, General Calanoga.
Lilinawin ko lang po, sir, na nararapat lang na pag mayroon tayo nasaktan, dapat mag-apologize po tayo. Pero hindi po namin sinasabi na nagkaroon po ng profile. Kagaya po ng sinabi ko kanina, ang pagtatanong po ng ating mga patrol officers ay kasama po sa kanilang trabaho para malaman po nila kung ano man po ang nangyayari sa kanilang nasasakupan. At mandato po nila yan. Ang report po na to ay ang information po ng mga ethics. Yung mga bagay po na sinasabing profiling, red tagging, kung meron po silang reklamo, nakalaan po ang ating tanggapan upang i-entertain po yung kanilang reklamo at bibigyan po natin ng kaukulang aksyon. So koordinasyon lang po. Pwede pong makipag-ugnayan po mismo sa aking opisina upang gabayan po kung sino man po ang may reklamo mula sa mga pantry organizers. Yun lang po, Mr. Chair. Thank you po.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kong Zara. Sino yung nag-raise?
Yusek Cruz Ilagan
yes,
po,
Yusek
sir.
Ilagan. Sorry.
Yeah, kasi nabanggit po na ang tanong ay anong ginagawa ng DSWD about those who underwent trauma. Well, if they can go to the DSWD field office kung saan sila naroroon at sabihin nila na sila ay nag-undergo ng ganitong experience, the DSWD is always ready to provide psychosocial counseling. But they have to give us the names and they have to inform us. Thank you po, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kong Sara.
Ang hamon ko po sa ating mga officials na nandito, alam na po natin, lalo na po kung sa DSWD, kung may available na mga services para po tumulong dun sa pag-deal with the trauma ng naranasan na they are really felt harassed, and we must recognize that. At tayo na po yung magpunta doon sa kanilang mga komunidad. Ang problema po dahil nga sa gitna ng pandemya, talagang at ito na rin yung nagbunsod doon sa emergence ng mga community pantries at marami pang mga efforts. Ang hirap po talaga sa biyahe, sa mobility, yung ating mga kababayan. Kaya imbes po na tayo pa yung magsasabi na magpunta sa ating field offices, meron naman po tayong mga social workers na pwedeng immobilize para din po makatulong. Pagdating naman po sa PNP, welcome naman po yung inyong sasabi na pwede naman po sa inyo magpunta. Kaso hindi rin po natin masisisi yung ating mga kababayan na makaramdam talaga ng takot o pangamba. Dahil doon din sa record nung mga abuse sa authority na naranasan po natin, hindi lang po ngayon sa gitna ng pandemya, kundi sa drug war at marami pong iba na nakasalukuyan na rin na iniimbestigahan at nananawagan po tayo ng pananagutan. Pagdating naman po sa CHR, Mr. Chair, pwede po ba na sila po ay mag-assist dito po sa mga community pantry organizers na meron pong mga reported abuse, allegations ng profiling at ng red tagging para matiyak na po natin na merong pananagutan, na meron pong mananagot at hindi na matigil yung mga nakikita natin na mga tagging, labeling, mga discriminatory remarks nakikita po natin sa social media. Asa ngayon po ba, ano po yung efforts na ginagawa ng CHR tungkol dito?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I did not mention specifically the investigations done now by CHR and also the National Capital Region. They are ongoing, Mr. Chair, but I am not at liberty to divulge at the moment. But I assure the good Congresswoman Sara Ilago that at least I think I was given information that at least 4 incidents being now investigated by the Commission on Human Rights. And Mr. Chair, may I just take this incident, this opportunity also to respond to Yusek Katura on economic, social, and cultural rights. Tama po kayo. Yes, yeah. ECOSOC, Mr. Chair. Pero meron din ho tayong ICCPR. Hindi po yan hiwalay. Alam po naman natin ang karapatang pantao ay interdependent. Magkakaugnay-ugnay po yan. 15 years lang po ako, Yusek Katura, at I met you when I was still with the Commission on Elections. At alam naman natin sa government, we should not be, di ba, hindi ho tayo dapat onion skin. I've been in government and always, this is my 4th government agency. At sa harap ng Commission on Elections, halos, yung banat sa komisyon is always there. When I was in the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, ganun din. But we did not prevent people. We did not detain people. We did not ask authorities to detain people para lang dahil for the expression of their practicing their freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. So siguro sa panahon ng pandemya po, alalahanin din po natin, hindi lang po usapin ito ng ang COVID po, pandemic at mga responses, hindi lang po ECOSOC po ito. Usapin din po ito ng karapatan.
Chairman, hindi pa po ako tapos dun sa aking mga katanungan.
Okay.
Sasagutin ko lang sa human rights, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before Kong Sara, yung sasagutin lang ni Deputy Majority Leader Remulla yung sa human rights. Then I'll go back to Kong Sara.
Well, ano yan eh. We have freedom. We have freedoms that we treasure. Freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, all of these guaranteed freedoms. But there's no freedom to destroy government and no freedom. Nakakalaban ng lipunan, nalabanan talaga. So if you really want to go on the other side of the road, then you give up many rights. That's it eh. Pagka talagang gusto mong labanan ng gobyerno at gusto mong patalsikin ang mga tao dyan at ibagsak ang gobyerno, you have to suffer the consequence also when you enter a rebellion. Rebellion is a crime. When you commit a crime, meron talagang price to pay for that. So let's call a spade a spade. Kung kalaban ka ng lipunan, kalaban ka ng lipunan. That's it.
Mr.
Ano
Chair?
pa bang gusto nyo mangyari? You have your cake and eat it too? Hindi naman ganun ang buhay eh. Kung gusto mong labanan ng ang Armed Forces of the Philippines, then be at war. But you suffer the consequence. Lahat naman tao tinatabla ng bala, di ba?
Yes, Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
very much.
May I reply, Mr. Chair? We are not against government. What we're only saying is allow our citizens to exercise the mere, yung pagpuna po lang sa gobyerno ay hindi naman po dapat interpret yan na against ka ng gobyerno. It's actually a reminder. Mr. Chair, may just finish? It's just a reminder lang po.
Remulla will just allow CHR to state.
Ang sinasabi po namin, ang posisyon po namin dyan, it's actually a reminder kung pero tayo po ay napupuna, it's just a reminder of our responsibilities. It's just that. Tapos na po. But ibang usapin po if yung sinasabi po ninyo na
say something.
Yes, Kong Sara.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Opo, yung mga critical na mga statement demanding accountability on the government pandemic response and the building of the recovery plan are all part of a protected speech guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. Wala pong illegal dito at hindi po ito maaaring pakialaman ng PNP, ng AFP, ng ating law enforcement agencies. Tama naman po si Deputy Majority Leader Remulla. No, rebellion is a crime at wala naman pong tututol dyan. No? Pero ang atin pong sinasabi dito, bakit po natin dinidikit yung pagpatay sa mga tao na kaugnay ng rebellion doon sa mga community pantries?
Pero aiding and abetting a rebellion is a crime
hindi
also.
Hindi po ito pumapatay. No? In fact, it is saving lives. No? Yung emergency.
Aiding and abetting rebellion is also a crime.
Yung pagpapatuloy nito ay talaga pong sobrang nakakaligtas pa no, ng buhay. At yung mismong pagtawag ng pananagutan, hindi ba dapat i-take yun ng government bilang a welcome, no, na challenge, na gawin niya yung trabaho niya na to really intervene, to save lives, protect the health and well-being of the people. Hindi niyo po pwedeng sabihin na porket sumusuporta sa community pantry ay sumusuporta rin sa rebellion. Kasi parang ganun po yung inyong pinaparating dito.
Gusto mo i-connect namin? I-connect ko sa'yo. Kung gusto mo, i-connect ko. Pag tumutulong sa community pantry, ay rebellion, tumutulong sa rebellion. Pero may mga tao na may ibang adikain na nariyan sa community pantry na meron talagang koneksyon sa pagpapagbagsak ng gobyerno. aiding and abetting a rebellion is a crime in itself also. Sana maintindihan natin yan. I have nothing against helping community pantries. I help community pantries. Pero pag tumutulong ka sa rebellion, you have to suffer for the consequence. Yun lang naman yun di ba?
Yes, ayan nga yung ating nagiging suliranin dito, Mr. Chair. No? Pag in-accept na natin yung ganyan baseless accusations, kung meron po kayong mga ganyang accusations, dalhin po natin sa korte. Hindi yung nakikita natin in social media, sa mga public statements na merong
siguro kung sana just to put
accusations na ganito,
just
na
to
very
put
general.
this hearing, this briefing into the proper perspective, i-avoid na muna natin yung yung cases na ginawa yung ating mga uniform personnel in DSWD will submit kung ano yung mga nagawa nila, and what's important is to be able to improve yung ating yung ating response and understanding of each other's action.
Yes, indeed, Chair Bong, kasi hindi rin po natin papayagan that the Human Rights Committee would be a venue for red tagging and for such.
No, hindi naman. In fact, we have clarified that. That's why we call this hearing, so that everyone would be made aware of the issues which are being raised against each other, and how we could proceed with clarity, considering yun nga, both sides have reasons and of course yan yung gusto natin ayusin. So kagaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, there were clarifications made na siguro iba yung pag-iingat na lang doon sa approach natin para hindi nga nami-misconstrue ng mga tao yung mga aksyon na ating ginagawa. And of course, I would also point out that on the part of our uniform personnel, they also have responsibilities to undertake, especially when it comes to handling peace and order. Kaya naman meron mga aksyon na dapat ginagawa. Doon lang sa mga aksyon na ginagawa ng PNP, kailangan lang ng iba yung paglilinaw na so lest it be misconstrued as profiling or red tagging. Kaya dapat magkaintindihan tayo dito. At ang bottom line natin ito, we all appreciate yung community pantry which was initiated or which has started, which has sprung, which has grown in our country. The PNP has also participated in which is being brought about by this community pantry. Ang importante lang nga, first, actions of the uniformed personnel are not misconstrued. That they have to be careful with their actions so that it is not misconstrued as either profiling or red tagging. On the part naman ng organizer ng community pantry, kailangan maintindihan rin nila that there are responsibilities that has to be undertaken by the uniformed personnel. At yun nga, kung meron mang mga community pantries na nagagamit as a front, we should not generalize. Then we should identify kung saan to nangyayari at kung anong community pantry ito, and limit it to that, and not at hindi madama yung mga iba with good intentions. So with this, palagay ko dahil alas 12 na at wala akong pan-lunch dito.
Mr. Chair, last na, sorry po, hindi ko po ito pwedeng palagpasin.
Okay.
May last
na yan, Ma'am Sara.
Yung pag-ugnay po kasi ng NTF-LCAC, yung pag-ugnay po kasi ng NTF-LCAC kay yung pagsasabi po ng NTF-LCAC na inimbestigahan nila o marami silang katanungan kay Patricia noon dahil siya po ay nagtaas kamao. Ano pong malaya po yung ating mga kababayan for as long as hindi po gumagawa ng krimen. Bakit po natin parang sinasabi na dahil lang po na siya ay may litrato na nakataas kamao, ibig sabihin po ba nun, binibigyan na natin ng katwiran na siya
yan, politicized lang. Na-politicize kasi yung community pantry. Dapat talaga hindi talaga politicized. Yun lang naman yun.
Pwede mag-appeal, Mr. Chair, sir?
Tama na. Sino muna yung sasagot nun? Last question na ni Kong Sara yon. Baka tungkol saan yung sayon?
Actually, Mr. Chair, meron 3 points siya na na-raise kanina. Pati yung sa CHR. Kasi kailangan ko pong sagutin din yun, no? Kasi mukhang sinasabi niya bakit daw hindi natin pinag-uusapan din ang ICCPR. Ang sagot ko lamang dyan po Opo, ang sagot ko lamang po dyan please remind me if the next session, sir, will be talking about the enhanced community, the emergence of community pantries as a protection mechanism for civil and political rights. Kasi the last, nakita ko po sa agenda natin, mukhang ECOSOC rights yung nakaano ko, yung presentation ko po, nakafocusan doon. Pasensya na po kayo kung nandun lang, ano. Anyway, pangalawa po, kay Miss Sara Ilago, maraming salamat ma'am sa mga katanungan po ninyo, no. Pero gusto kong bagatin una muna, I think we overestimate naman yung capacity ng mga tao natin na magreklamo para bang lahat na lamang ng nasiservisyo ng community pantry ipabor sa ginagawa ng mga organizers. Babalikan ko po, tao po ang nagreklamo, hindi gobyerno Tao talaga Alam niyo po ba, ako masakit ang sumagitin ng puso ko kasi ni-raise sila yung issue na tumaas ang kamao. Ma'am Sara Ilago, nung ako po ay nasa UP, ako po ang chair ng Forum for Rural Concerns, ang student arm ng KMP. Alam ko po yun. Ako, nagaganyan po ako sa sa kalsada, ganun din. Kaya nalulungkot po ako na yung dating adikain natin pagiging aktivismo, ginawa na ng iba ng narrative, no? So, yung po ang gusto kong bagitin dyan. Pangatlo, marami po kayo mga sinasuggest, mga ways forward for government, for the CHR, for the uniform personnel. Ang tanong po natin ganito. Again, nothing about us without us. Ano po naman masasuggest nyo para naman doon sa mga organizers ng community pantry na dapat gagawin nila? Para nga talaga magkaroon ng maayos ang community pantry ito. Sana hindi na po maulit yung nangyari doon sa community pantry ni Angel Locsin, no? Na kung saan may isang grupo na akala nila kaya nilang gawin ang trabaho ng gobyerno. Napakakonti lamang yan, no? As against the millions of Filipinos who need a community pantry. Pero sinasabi nila na kami ang gagawa na, tingnan mo nangyari. Nagpandemonyo, may namatay pang isa. So coordinate with government. So I suggest po, advise nyo rin po yung mga organizers ng tamang advice in as much as we welcome yung advice po para sa gobyerno at para sa mga uniform personnel at sa CHR na rin.
Thank you,
Maraming salamat po.
Putulin ko na dito.
Sagutin ko lang saglit.
I don't want to encourage a debate between any of the participants dahil meron na naman paglilinaw na napag-usapan dito at yun naman kailangan ayusin natin and we must move forward. Papatawag ulit tayo ng hearing pagka after this nagkaroon ulit after ng mga paglilinaw na ginawa natin ngayon, meron pa rin mga incidenteng mangyayari dahil yung committee ko naman handang magpatawag ng hearing when it comes to any violations of anyone's human rights. So with this,
Sir Yusek si Egco has been raising his
yes,
hand.
Yusek Joel, ikaw na magsara.
Thank you, Idol. Mr. Chair, maraming pong salamat for this really very wonderful opportunity, no, to clarify the government's position, in fact, everybody's positions, no, with regards to the community party. And I'm very honored and the entire committee for conducting this kind of hearing wherein kita po natin, no, nagkaroon ng alignment, no, from all sides nagkaroon po ng alignment. Well, basically po, Mr. Chair, no, nasabi na po lahat ng ating mga kasama, nila Yusek Aturan, nila Gerald Parladen, nila General Naknak, ang ating pong mga kapwa public servants, ang kanila pong mga punto hinggil dito sa community pantry. Alam mo po, to cap this hearing, lahat po tayo supported sa community pantry at lahat po ng klase at forma ng bayanihan spirit. Yan po ang uniqueness ng mga Pilipino, Mr. Chair. Yan po hindi maagaw sa mga Pilipino. Bayanihan. In fact, as early as during the heightened lockdown last year, kasama po ako umiikot nila ng mga generals po natin, La Gerald Sermonia in particular sa Central Luzon, papamigay po kami live chickens. Mga kaibigan ko, nagbibigay ng libo-libo itlog. No, I heard somebody na ganun po talaga ang giving. Community pantries is not new. I'd like to correct that. It's not a new name. It's not a new concept. In fact, marami po sa New Zealand, sa Australia, nung araw pa yan. And katulad sabi ni General Naknak, As early as in the 60s, may mga food banks na sinasabi, no? So, lahat po ito ay nalinawan natin ngayon. And Mr. Chair, I think this is the most important realization today, no? Na there is a public safety interest involved in all this. Not only, well, public safety is human rights, of course, no? Kasi po, ang problema po natin ngayon, although we encourage community pantries, now we do it door to door. In fact, kasi po may pandemic, Mr. Chair. If community pantries are set up after a typhoon, after an earthquake, or any other natural disasters for that matter, okay lang po yun eh. But during a pandemic, there is definitely a public safety interest involved here, Mr. Chairman, because one infected apple passed on to several hands. Di po ba magiging super spreaders yung ating pong mga pantries? I have friends and relatives who put up their own pantries in Nueva Ecija, in Gapan, and in Cabiao. And I donated, no po. Because for us, it's a very noble, as a form of our bayanihan spirit. No po, hindi po natin inaalis yun eh. That's true. However, tingnan po natin yung public safety interest dito, no, as part of our human rights obligations, no. Halimbawa po, unang tanong, kung hindi po tatanungin ng mga alagad ng batas natin o ng mga local government officials natin, sino organizer, paano po ba nagkaroon ng pandemic time, ng super spreader? Sino po ang mananagot? Di po ba ang mga local chief executives, ang mga local PNP natin? So, profiling itself is a misnomer. Di po ba? Depende kasi on how looks at it. But from a government perspective, yung po ang tinitingnan ko doon teka, paano kung may mangyaring ganito? Sino mananagot dito? Hahabulin mo ba yung mga organizers? Hindi po ba ang sisi at sisi ay sa atin po rin sa gobyerno? And when I say government, sabi kanina, palpak daw ang ating reaction. And when sinabing government, all of us here, no? Most of us here are from government. I hate to, I don't agree with that. Kasi po, it's too premature to tell that palpak tayo. In fact, I heard our honorable members of this committee a while ago, they're still asking for an inventory and audit of government projects and programs in relation to this ayuda and all that, di po ba? So hindi pa tayo masasabing palpak because this is a very dynamic situation. We're still adapting to how the COVID virus is behaving. Di po ba? Kung wala pong virus dito talaga namang walang problema po tayo sa mga pantries na yan. No? But again, in closing, Mr. Chair, yun po yun. No? Hindi lang po human rights, but also public safety. Of course, I would not allow my kids and my grandchild to go out, no, in a pandemic situation and give whatever we have extra or take what we need. And for the very last input, Mr. Chair, ang problema po ngayon dito, yes, we encourage sharing, giving, being good neighbors. Di po ba? Tama po yun. You give what you have extra, you take what you need. However, that cannot be sustained under the circumstances because we are in a pandemic and there are dire, serious questions, economic questions now. Hindi po siya masusustain. Kaya nga po nagsolicit na sila nagsusolicit na ng donations because during this economic hardships during the pandemic, malamang po sa malamang, mas ma-overtake ng mga nangangailangan yung magbibigay ng sobra. So yun po yun. And I'm very happy that all those things are put in their proper perspective during this hearing. I congratulate you po, Idol, Mr. Chairman, and all the members of this committee. And of course, Senior Deputy Majority Leader, Boying Rebullion.
Move to adjourn. Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, final manifestation before we adjourn. Mr. Chair?
Sir, naka-mute po kayo.
On that note, well, alam mo, dapat may motion to adjourn na, pero dahil talagang nagagandahan ako kay Kong Sara, sige, yung statement mo, Kong Sara, na aking kaibigan, your final statement, please. before we
Mr.
adjourn?
Chair, the members of the committee, all other resource persons, the government has the power and the obligation, the primary obligation to intervene and save lives in the midst of the pandemic. Kaya po, ang aking panawagan dun sa mga naging hamon kanina pagdating sa kabataan, sa panawagan ng kabataan, unang-una po kinakailangan ng sapat, ang tuloy-tuloy, ang kagyat na ayuda doon sa lahat ng mga nangangailangan na sektor, lalong-lalo na yung mga nawalan po ng trabaho at ng kabuhayan sa gitna ng pandemya ng COVID-19 sa ating bansa, kasabay ng isang transparent at equitable na rollout ng COVID-19 vaccination program dito sa ating bansa. Pangatlo po, pagdating naman sa NTF-ELCAC, talaga pong hindi nakakatulong at dapat itigil na ang lahat ng red tagging at may kinalaman po doon sa discriminatory remarks, no, laban po doon sa mga kritikal na nagpapahayag ng kanilang mga nararamdaman, karaingan at mga panawagan no, sa ating gobyerno. Kinakailangan din po, no, pagdating naman sa mga community pantry organizers, it's okay no, to help our kababayans, of course, with strict adherence to minimum health protocols. But it's also okay, no? It's fine and it's unnecessary no, to demand accountability from the government in terms of our pandemic response and recovery plan. Hindi po krimen ang tumulong, hindi po krimen ang humingi ng pananagutan mula po sa ating may kapangyarihan. Maraming salamat, Ginoong.
Maraming salamat. And on that note and statement of Congresswoman Sara Ilago, I am calling this hearing adjourned. Thank you very much sa inyong lahat sa pag-participate nyo sa ating briefing ngayong araw na ito. Senior Deputy Majority Leader Boying, thank you very much.